Hey friends, before we dive into tonight's story, did you know that nearly 80% of viewers aren't subscribed? If you're enjoying this content, hit that subscribe button. It really helps keep these long stories coming. Also, for even more police horror stories, check out my new channel. The link's in the description and pinned comment. I'd love it if you stop by and subscribe. I'd love to hear from you. What time is it where you are and which city are you listening from tonight? Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into it. I still wake in the dark, sweat staining my shirt, heart hammering against the rib that cracked a few years back. It's the same room I've slept in for the last decade. Cheap motel just west of Van Horn, neon sign sputtering outside my window. I hit the alarm on my phone, but I already know what time it is. 00:47. 47 minutes past midnight. Not that it matters. My body's been tuned to the graveyard shift for longer than I care to admit. I slide out of bed, flex my back, hips still stiff from last night's rounds, then pull on my uniform. Dusty tan shirt with a single name patch, black trousers, worn leather belt. My badge feels heavy against my sternum, like a weight I carry even when I'm off duty. The light's off in the room, but I know every crease in these cheap curtains. I pause at the window, listening. Crickets. One distant rig horn, perfectly still, like the world's holding its breath. 3 months ago, I'd have told you everything about the job was routine. Harmless if you kept your head down and your eyes open. I'd have said the worst you'd see at 2 in the morning on State Route 285 was an abandoned livestock trailer or a drunk guy passed out in the median. But the past few months have taught me just how quickly routine slips through your fingers. I grab my coffee, black, stale, and head for the cruiser. It's parked out front, engine idling low so I don't wake anyone inside. Hopper's Shell station down the road keeps the key in a lockbox overnight, but I still leave mine in, ready the second they flip the switch. As I walk, I check my pockets. Flashlight, radio, tourniquet, sidearm, full duty, no exceptions. I check the cruiser's dash camera mount. Everything's latched. I've learned the hard way that if the camera's off when something happens, whatever it was might as well have been a dream. I slide into the seat. The cab smells like old vinyl and air freshener that's given up. I tap the camera. Green light. Good. I punch the mic. Beeville Dispatch, Unit 27, starting shift at 0100 hours. Static crackles back. No response. That's new too. Normally they're dead on top of it. I drop the mic, pull out my phone for the official shift start, then toss it back in the console. Let the technology keep the time. I don't trust it any further than it lies to me. The highway stretches east toward Childress, pitch black save for my headlights cutting 2 pale ribbons into the night. Nothing moves. No other cruisers, no rigs, no headlights on side roads. Every mile marker clicks by. 22, 23, 24. We've got few houses out here, spread thin, flatland stretching to blurry horizons. I pass a broken-down barn on the left. Planks rotting, nails rusting. No lock on the door. Happens a lot in these parts. Sometimes people forget, sometimes they don't care. I make a mental note to check it out next week. At mile 25, I hit the flashing yellow highway sign, "Drive safe." They love those signs, change them daily to remind people. I glance down at the dash. 0107. Almost time for my first radio check, but I'm still hearing nothing. I tap the mic again. Silence. My skin prickles, but I chalk it up to the caffeine. I'm usually the last person awake at night, and it messes with you. A few miles later, a lone CB antenna sits on a post by the road. I flip the switch. Static hiss. I key the mic. "Breaker, breaker, anyone out there?" Nothing. No growl of a CB voice talking about rigs or retreads. Just the hiss, like someone left a faucet dripping. I stare at the mic, half tempted to rip it out. But I can't. I need it. It's my only line to whatever world exists outside my headlights. I roll on past that antenna, and then I see it. A flash on the dash cam, a shape in the light's beam. At first, I think it's just a trick, a tumbleweed or a plastic bag caught on the wire fence. But it moves against the pattern. It's too deliberate. I slow down, easy on the brake, engine ticking down a gear. I flip on the cruiser's spotlight and angle it to the right shoulder. There, just off the pavement, a figure standing beneath a broken street lamp. Not more than 50 yards off. I twist in my seat so the spotlight picks it up. Someone in old coveralls, brimmed hat low, head tilted back, arms hanging at the sides. The light flickers, the glass half buried in dust, and every few seconds it sputters out. When it pops back on, the man's not where he was. I jerk the wheel, swivel the light around. Empty drill site. Oil pumps slumping in the background. Nothing. No man, no shadows. Only the light on the pump jack swinging meager arcs across the dirt road. My chest goes tight. The radio crackles, almost like a whisper, but then it dies. I don't even bother to key the mic. I just sit there, breathing heavy, knuckles pale on the wheel. I watch the spot where he stood. The camera's lens picks up the road behind me, and for a moment, I swear, I see dark shapes pacing just beyond the trees. But I don't get out. I won't, not for anything less than a call. I punch the mic. Unit 27 to dispatch. Please acknowledge. I wait, nothing. I scroll through the saved channels. Beeville, Childress, State Highway Patrol, all dead. I switch to emergency channel. Silence. I cross into a stretch of nothing but dead highway and a trailer park called Dry Creek Estates. Only 10 mobile homes spaced wide, each with rusty gates and half-lit porches. Tumbleweeds litter the gravel. I slow to 20, eyes scanning for movement. I hit the brake light. My camera catches a dog trotting across yards, skinny mutt, ribs sharp, eyes gleaming. It stops mid-stride, stares at me like it's sizing me up. Then it bolts back into the darkness. I exhale. Good dog. He got out. I keep going. I think about that figure in the coveralls. No gun, no flashlight, just standing there, waiting, watching me. I've seen things before. Drunks passed out, stray drivers, the occasional coyote crossing at sunset. But never someone just standing out here in the dead of night. Never someone willing to vanish when I pull up. I reach mile marker 32 and ease over to the gravel turnout. Engine idles. I grab my flashlight, radio, and step onto the gravel shoulder. The wind carries nothing but dust and distant rigs. I sweep the beam across the road. Concrete scarred with oil stains. Barbed wire fence sagging. Trailer homes dark as crypts. I see movement at the far edge of the park. A figure ducking behind a mobile home. I freeze, heart in my throat. I call out low, "Hey, you okay?" No answer. I round the trailer, light on the ground. A pair of boots scuffed facing me, not moving. I shine higher. Coveralls, faded name tag, brimmed hat tipped forward. No face, just darkness inside the hat. I swallow and take a step closer. The boots don't move. I lift the flashlight higher. The figure stays. I flick the light off and on. Nothing. I notice it now, the slight sway, as if caught in a breeze that doesn't exist. The CB crackles low and rough, like someone breathing through the speaker. I drop to one knee to hit the mic. "Hello?" My voice shakes. The sound stops. I click the light off. Darkness. I click it back on, empty. My breath comes in loud trains. I stand, pocket the flashlight, and jog back to the cruiser. Slam. The door. I lock it automatically. I tap the camera. A green light. Good. I settle back, trying to calm myself, but I can't shake the image. The boots, the hat, no face, just that empty darkness. I twist the mic again. Dispatch, I'm clear. Over. Silence. The clock reads 1:55. I kill the engine and let the cruiser roll forward. No point in staying here, not without backup or, hell, even a radio signal. I ease back onto the highway toward Beeville, hands trembling. Every few seconds I glance at the video feed. Empty cab, the road behind my headlights, endless black. No sign of him, but I know he was there, I'm sure. And I know the next shift, someone else will pull that footage, see it for themselves, and either think we're all losing our minds or start asking questions. And those questions, they don't get answered easy out here. Not when something doesn't fit the reports, not when you have no proof, but memories. I flip the mic one last time just to feel something. Nothing. So I turn it off. I drive on, watching the yellow line blur beneath the headlights, heading deeper into the night. I tell myself I'm fine. It's just stress. Just fatigue. But every mile, the dread coils tighter in my gut, like something's already waiting for me at the end of the road, and it doesn't plan to wave me through. When I rolled back into the Beeville station at 2:23, the lobby was empty except for the janitor pushing his cart of supplies. He gave me a nod but didn't ask questions. Everybody's used to oddball hours out here. I parked in my usual spot, killed the engine, and sat for a moment. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed, and the faint drone of the HVAC was the only sound. I glanced at the dash cam feed one more time. Nothing but the silent highway receding into darkness. Inside, I hung up my jacket in the locker room and headed straight to the break room. Benny, our night shift dispatcher, was sipping lukewarm coffee at the counter. He looked up when I walked in. "You register on the scanners tonight?" he asked, voice low. "Nothing," I said, pouring my own cup. The coffee was stale, but I choked it down. Dead air, CB, dispatch, all silent. I stirred in 2 sugars and 1 creamer, trying to chase off the chill that had settled in my chest. Benny frowned. "That's unusual. Our backup lines work fine." He tapped the scanner panel behind the glass window. Nothing. "You sure your rig's tuned right?" "It's fine," I said. "I even checked the mount and connections before I left." He nodded slowly. "Tell you what, tomorrow you ride with me on the consoles. Let's see if it's the rig or something else." He gestured at the empty chairs. "Enjoy your break. I'll take the 3 a.m. checks, see if anyone calls in." I thanked him and headed up to my desk to review the night's footage. Block C from the jail came up first. No shadows, just cold concrete halls. Next was my dash cam, the empty road, the trailer park, that booted figure. I fast-forwarded a few times, but you couldn't fake the flicker of the street lamp or the way the dust drifted in its beam. It was unsettling, but I'd been doing this job long enough to trust my gut. Something was off. By the time I got back to the cruiser around 3:10 a.m., Emily, the rookie assigned for her first solo night, was sitting in the driver's seat with her radio mic cradled in her lap. She jumped when I opened the door. "Sorry, Sergeant," she said. "Thought you had the rig." She flicked on the spotlight for a second, then killed it. Trying to track a stalled motorist last call, no luck. I slipped in beside her and shut the door. "It's okay. You good?" She looked pale, eyes darting to the CB radio. "Everyone's quiet tonight," she said softly. "Even my handheld channel is dead." "Welcome to my world," I muttered. She tried to laugh, but it came out as a strangled cough. I grabbed the wheel and backed into the driveway. The engine idled, and Emily's knuckles whitened on the door handle. "I'm going to take point," I said. "You keep an eye on the scanners and console." She nodded, fidgeting with the mic. We pulled out onto the highway the same way I entered it. No headlights behind us, no sirens, just endless black. I flicked the headlights off and on a few times, almost as if I could force the night to stay ordinary, but it wouldn't. By 3:35, we'd reached the old oil field access road where I'd first spotted the figure. I slowed to a crawl just before the broken lamppost. Emily shone her spotlight right and left. Nothing. "Clear," she said. I eased the cruiser onto the gravel, put it in park, and shut off the engine. We sat for a moment. The dash cam's red rec light glowed bright. A soft wind stirred dust into little whirlwinds. In the stillness, the distant howl of a coyote reached us, sharp and haunting against the quiet. "Let's walk it," I said. "Stay close and keep that spotlight steady." Emily grabbed her radio and flashlight, and we stepped onto gravel that crunched under our boots. I lifted my own light, moving in slow sweeps across the fence line. The oil pumps leaned like silent sentinels. No movement. Then, off to the left, I saw it. A dark shape between two pump jacks, almost blending in with the shadows. It wasn't the same clothes. This figure wore a dusty work shirt and jeans, but it stood perfect and still, as if carved from the darkness itself. Emily's light flicked over it and caught the brim of a hat. "There," she whispered, breath catching. I flicked my beam in that direction. The figure didn't move. I took a few steps forward, heart pounding against my ribs, each beat echoing in my ears. I called out, "Hey, Unit 27, you need help?" No response. Not a whisper, not a shuffle. Just the figure, head tipped back, arms slack. I waited. Then, as if on cue, the figure's hat tipped forward, and it stepped into the clearing. I felt Emily's breath catch behind me. I trained my light on its face. Nothing but shadow. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just a void where a face should be. I started back, nearly tripping over a length of discarded pipe. "Back to the rig," I hissed. "Now." Emily hauled me by the sleeve and we sprinted across the gravel, boots slapping. I didn't look back until we were inside the cruiser. I slammed the door, locked it, and hit the spotlight control. The beam lanced out, but the lot was empty. No figure, no movement, nothing. Just the broken lamp still flickering above the road. Emily's hand shook on the console. The scanner lit up again with static, just static, and then flickered dead. I killed the spotlight, killed the engine, and thumbed the lock. We sat in darkness, the only light the faint glow of the console clock. 3:42. She saw nothing, Emily whispered. I kept my eyes on the dash cam feed. "It doesn't want to be seen," I said. "Or it only shows when it wants to." She swallowed, radio mic caged between her fingers. "What is it?" she asked. I didn't answer. I didn't have an answer. Instead, I pulled my phone from my pocket and checked my text threads. My wife, 3 photos of our daughter at her recital. I stared at her smiling face, warm lights on the stage, her dress bright under the spotlight. I thumbed a reply. "Miss you." I didn't send it. In the silence, I thought about the shape of that face. Never a face, really. Just darkness fitting like a mask. I thought about the sense of weight around me, as if the air thickened whenever it appeared. And I thought about my daughter sleeping at home, safe under her blankets, oblivious to everything that walked the night. I turned to Emily. "You okay to finish the shift?" She nodded stiffly. I think so." I leaned back in my seat. "Then let's go." I punched the mic twice, but it remained silent. "We'll finish our checks on foot," I said. "Stay behind me." She climbed out first. I followed, securing the doors. We ghosted down the highway shoulder toward the next gravel turnout. Mile marker 28, near the old barn, with no locks. In the distance, a stray dog barked once. I held my breath and did my rounds without talking. Emily's flashlight bobbed behind mine like a nervous heartbeat. Inside the barn, we found nothing but hay bales and old rusted implements. Feed troughs soaked into the floor. A faint smell of rot hung in the air. I swept the beam across the rafters. No movement. When we stepped back outside, Emily shivered. "Let's go," she said, voice low. I nodded. We headed back to the cruiser and drove on, the night pressing in all around us. Every mile closer to dawn felt like walking deeper into a dream that wouldn't let me wake up. I glanced over at Emily, pale in the glow of the dash lights. "You notice," I said, "it only shows in places where we're supposed to feel safe." She didn't answer. I wanted to tell her I'd handle it, that she'd be fine after today. But I couldn't. Because I knew the truth. This wasn't something you handled. Oh, it was something that handled you. Until you stopped noticing the darkness, until it became part of the routine. And that's when you realized you were already lost to it. We drove on, silent, chasing the horizon toward Childress. Chasing daylight we weren't sure would feel any safe. We crossed into the outskirts of Childress County just before 4 a.m., the sky still holding onto its deep indigo, a promise of dawn lurking beyond the horizon. I guided the cruiser past a derelict roadside cafe. Marion's Diner, the peeling sign read, its windows caked in dust, a half-burned cigarette butt wedged in the doorframe. No lights, no life. I glanced over at Emily. She was pressed against the passenger door, shoulders tense, eyes fixed on the empty road ahead. "Third checks around here," I murmured. Abandoned border outpost called Ridgeway Checkpoint back in the 70s. They tore it down ages ago, but the foundations and faded graffiti stick around. She shifted in her seat. I keyed the mic again, half hoping for a scratch of static, but still nothing. Just the deep hum that had become the night's soundtrack. We eased off the pavement onto a washboard gravel path. I killed the engine at the old checkpoint marker, two rusted steel posts leaning into each other like tired soldiers. The dash cam's red light pulsed, the only glow in the cab. "Stay with me," I said softly, slipping out and closing the door. I pocketed my radio mic and picked up the flashlight. Emily followed, boot heels clicking against metal plates embedded in the ground. The air here smelled of hot iron and dry earth, a metallic tang that stuck to my tongue. It was the kind of smell that makes you swallow hard and want to breathe shallow, as if really deep breaths would pull some unseen thing into your lungs. I swept my beam across the remains of the old guard shack. Charred wood hung from warped hinges. Half-buried barrels lay tipped on their sides. Beyond it, a low hill crowned by a collapsed stone arch. Remnants of some defunct CB repeater station loomed in the distance. "Any sign of movement?" I asked Emily. She shook her head, voice barely above a whisper. "Nothing." We fanned out, moving in slow arcs. Every footstep kicked up tiny stones that rattled across the ground like muted gunfire. The razor wire fence to our right still stood, anchored to rotten wooden posts. I ran a gloved hand along the wire, cold, sharp, indifferent. I crossed to the base of the hill, expecting emptiness. Instead, I found footprints pressed into the red dirt, long boot prints spaced wider than mine, fresh. I crouched, beam angled low. The toe impressions were crisp, small pebbles pressed into the heel wedges. Whoever, or whatever, had been here walked deliberately, not stumbling. "Sergeant, look at this!" Emily knelt beside me, her light trembling. I traced the prints toward the arch. They vanished where the ground gave way to loose gravel, as if the walker faded into the hill. My gut nodded. "Did you see anything on the camera when we pulled in?" I asked. She shook her head again. "I didn't check." I stood, dusting off my knees. "Let's keep moving." We ascended the slope of the hill, the only sound the crunch of gravel underfoot. My flashlight beam played over twisted rebar, chunks of concrete, and graffiti scrawled decades ago. "No entry, last stop," half-erased words in spray paint. At the top, the stone arch loomed like a gaping maw. I crouched under it, flashlight raised, scanning the darkness beyond. "Clear," I said, but I didn't believe it. On my dash cam, I replayed the live feed in my mind. Behind the cruiser, through the windshield, I'd glimpsed a dark form perched atop the arch, hybrid of man and shadow, its legs folded like a crouching cat. I'd stiffened, engine drone oscillating as I stared, heart thundering. Then it leapt down, just a blur, and disappeared into the gloom. I turned slowly, sweeping my flashlight around. The hillside behind me was empty, save for the cracked arch and the lingering echo of movement. Emily's breath fogged in the beam. I thought I saw something on the cam, just a flash, a shape on the archway. I nodded, mouth dry. Me too. We skirted the edge of the hill, back toward the shack and the fence line. I checked the radio mic for signal. Nothing. Not a whisper, not a creak. Just that oppressive quiet. Then the CB hissed, faint, distant, but unmistakable. It crackled once like a gasp. Then silence. I held my breath, heart hammering. The mic slipped from my grasp. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. Emily's eyes were wide. "Yes." I didn't respond. I swept the beam down the fence. For a moment, the barbed wire above seemed to quiver, like a ripple traveling through metal. My pulse spiked. I edged closer, following the flicker of the beam. There, etched into the metal fencing, fresh gouges, long, angular slashes gouged through the top strand, as if a blade cut, then recut, dragging across 8 feet of wire. I crouched, fingers tracing the jagged edges. No rust, bright silver metal beneath. New. A low wind kicked up dust around us, and with it, a groan, half sigh, half moan, like someone exhaling onto a mic. The CB crackled again, the static vibrating through the air, and beneath it I could swear I heard my name. "Sergeant, 27. Emily went still. I closed my eyes, letting the dark press in. Then I grabbed her arm. "Back to the cruiser, now." We didn't run. We moved methodically like soldiers ordered to retreat. Every step kicked gravel, sending echoes across the desert plain. By the time we reached the cab, my shirt was slick against my back. I slammed the door and locked it, pocketing my flashlight. I turned the key. Nothing. The engine choked, coughed, and died. My jaw clenched. I tapped the dash cam mount. Green light. At least that was working. I jiggled the key again, click, click. But the starter wouldn't respond. Emily pounded on the door, voice trembling. "Sarge, come on." I forced the starter one more time. It caught. The engine groaned to life. I pressed the mic. "Beevil, dispatch, come in." Silence. I backed onto the gravel road, tires spinning on loose stones. I kept the cruiser in first gear, rolling until I hit solid pavement. The dashboard clock read 4:12. I muttered under my breath. 12 minutes till relief shift. 12 minutes until someone else would take over. Behind me, on the dash cam, I thought I saw the arch, framed by my taillights. No longer solid stone, but a blur of smoke-like forms, drifting around the collapsed repeaters. I couldn't be sure. I didn't dare look directly. We drove on toward Childress proper, engines humming over the blacktop. My heart thundered, but I forced myself to breathe steady. Every instinct screamed to stop, to call for backup, to run. But what good would that do when the radios were dead and the night had swallowed every call for help? As we passed the city limits sign, white letters glowing dim against the sky, I flicked on the overhead strobes, painting the roadside in red and blue. Then I shut them down. I wanted no lights, I wanted no announcements. I only wanted to deliver Emily to safety and finish my shift. She sat tensely, hands clasped so tight her knuckles went white. I offered her a nod. "We'll be fine once the next unit is in charge." She didn't reply. I didn't blame her. What had happened out there didn't stick to reason or ease itself away. It carved into you, etched fear into your memory, like those fresh gouges on the fence wire. We turned onto Highway 287, the final stretch to the station. The first hint of pale glow had begun to creep over the horizon. I kept the lights off until the sun broke. Then, as the sky shifted from navy to bruised violet, I flipped on the headlights. In the waning darkness, I looked across at Emily's reflection in the window, her face drawn, eyes hollowed by terror. I felt a pang, a guilt that settled in my chest like a brick. I'd brought her here, into this silence, into this deep, dark quiet that had no business being so empty. I checked the side mirror as we sped toward the station. Gone were the low hills, the looming arch, the quiet gouged fence. Only flat roads and the promise of other officers awake now. But I knew it wasn't gone. Not really. It had followed us, carried its weight in my bones. I just didn't know how heavy it would grow before it revealed its next secret. I punched the mic one last time. "Unit 27 inbound," I said. No answer. I eased my foot off the gas. The cruiser coasted forward toward the sliding doors of the precinct, toward coffee and paperwork, and the sterile routine of daylight. But in the back of my mind, I heard the CB hiss, just a whisper. And I knew that wherever I parked this rig, whatever report I turned in, whoever wrote it up in neat bullet points, the night still held its secrets, and it was far from ready to let me walk away. I handed off Emily to the morning shift at exactly 5 a.m. The transition was clinical. Another deputy stepped into the cruiser, coffee in one hand, energy in his voice. He didn't ask questions, he never does. On graveyard shift, questions are liabilities. I watched as Emily climbed out, legs unsteady, and walked toward the squad room, headlights fading behind her. She didn't look back. I didn't blame her. The new deputy, Johnson, patted me on the shoulder. "Rough night?" he said, voice bright. "Just another shift," I replied, forcing a smile. He climbed in, settled behind the wheel. I shut the door and locked it. I watched him pull away, lights off, engine silent against the gray dawn. Then I reached into the console for my phone, thumbed through unread messages. My wife had texted, "Don't forget soccer practice tomorrow." I stared at the screen, the words blurred by fatigue. I typed back, "Got it," I didn't send it. I sat alone in the Bay Area, under fluorescent lights that no one had bothered to fix. The walls were scuffed, grease-stained from decades of cruisers. Next to me, rack after rack of coffee-stained paperwork beckoned. Incident reports, shift summaries, evidence logs, routine, safe. But I couldn't focus. At 5:15, I made my way to the locker room. I peeled off my uniform, shirt damp at the seams, trousers stiff with dust, and swapped into plain clothes. Jacket off. Badge clipped onto the locker door. I paused, hand on the handle, and looked into my own reflection in the metal. My eyes were ringed with dark shadows, my face drawn. I wondered if I even recognized myself anymore. I stepped into the locker room corridor, the hum of the station awakening around me. Phones ringing, doors opening, radios crackling. I left without a word and walked past the lineup of patrol bikes, the evidence lockers, the roll call whiteboard with names and notes scrawled in faded marker. My partner's name, Jackson, was there with a checkmark next to it, indicating he was late this morning. Not unusual, Jackson always smelled of whiskey before dawn. I thought about calling him, warning him about the shift, but I didn't. I didn't trust my voice to sound normal. Outside, the Texas wind had picked up. Dust devils spun across the parking lot. I pulled my jacket around me and headed toward my car. On the way, I passed the evidence drop-off box. It was locked, but the slot was empty. No envelopes, no stray keys, no notes. I wondered if something, had rifled through it last night, slipping in and out unnoticed. But when I reached in, it was just as empty. Routine. My car was parked a few stalls down, windows fogged from the air conditioning. I climbed in, started the engine, and turned the radio to FM. Static, only static, no morning talk shows, no traffic updates, just the same hiss that had haunted my shift. I flipped through presets, country, rock, news, dead air everywhere. I killed the radio and drove off the lot, heading north toward home. The station's neon sign blinked off behind me. The roads were quiet. At the edge of town, I passed by the old landfill, tarps flapping over trash, black gulls wheeling overhead, a warning sign, no trespassing. I remembered chasing a stolen ATV there 2 summers ago. Mud, laughter, kids scattering into the brush. That would have made for a fine story had I been able to radio in the chase. But now, the memories felt hollow, tainted by the dread that had crept into my nights. As I neared my subdivision, the pavement turned to cracked concrete driveways and streetlights buzzing overhead. I turned onto Lakeview Drive, my street, and slowed to 15. Houses clustered close here, lawns neatly trimmed, white picket fences, solar-powered yard lights, welcome mats emblazoned with "Home Sweet Home." I pulled into my driveway, engine idling. I stared at the front door, the windows dark. Inside, my daughter would be asleep, her small chest rising and falling. My wife's phone light probably danced across the kitchen table as she typed her to-do list. I reached for my phone to text again, this time with something affectionate, something real, but the screen went blank. Battery dead. I tossed it onto the passenger seat and turned off the engine. The world outside my windows was utterly silent. I stepped out and crossed the short yard. My footsteps crunched on gravel. I stopped at the front porch rail and looked back toward the horizon. The sky was pale blue, the faintest glow of sunrise staining the clouds. I inhaled, tasting the cool morning air, but beneath it lay the smell of dust and earth, and something that reminded me of the metal tang at the old checkpoint. I exhaled slowly. I eased in through the front door, quietly this time, so as not to wake them. The house smelled like clean laundry and coffee beans. I padded down the hallway. In the living room, the TV flickered a screensaver no one bothered to turn off. In my daughter's room, her little pink blanket was crumpled at the foot of the bed. I tucked it back around her shoulders and kissed her forehead. She stirred, but didn't wake. Down the hall, I found my wife in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, eyes red but trying to smile. "You're home early," she murmured. "Shift ended," I said quietly. "Long night." She stepped forward, arms opening. I hesitated, then held her. She smelled like lavender and stress. "You okay?" I closed my eyes. "I'm fine." I let her lead me to the couch. She folded into my lap and I stroked her hair. The day awoke outside. The distant bark of a dog, a lawnmower rumbling, birds starting their morning chorus. It should have been peaceful, but in the back of my mind I saw that docked archway, the gouged fence, the faceless figure on the trailer park shoulder. I heard the CB hisses, felt the cold draft inside that busted street lamp. I knew those things weren't done with me, not by a long shot. My wife's voice cut through my fog. "Talk to me." I opened my mouth and closed it. I didn't have the words. I wanted to tell her, "There's nothing to talk about, I'm okay." But it would be a lie. There was everything to talk about, and I had no idea how to start. So I just held her tighter and watched the sunrise through the window, soft pinks bleeding into gold, while something in the horizon watched back, waiting. And I knew I wasn't safe, not really, until I figured out what it was looking for. Until I knew what it meant when the world went quiet and the radios died and the shadows took shape around the things we thought were solid. I closed my eyes and prayed for daylight that would reach further than the sunrise, reach into the corners of my mind where the dread lived, and pull it all into the light. But even as I prayed, I knew some things only grew in the dark. Daylight never seemed to matter once you'd seen what I saw. 6 hours after I finally crawled into bed, my mind still buzzing with images of faceless figures and silent CB whispers, I hauled myself back to the station for the next shift. The sun was high enough to cast white glare off the parking lot pavement, but inside the precinct, fluorescent bulbs reigned. They never went out. I stepped into the records room at 1 p.m., nodding to Garcia, our records clerk, who was hunched over his keyboard, brow furrowed. He looked up as I approached. "Been looking at last night's logs?" he said without preamble, voice low. "You know there's nothing on Channel 2 or 7 between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m., all entries erased." I frowned. Erased? That's automatic backup. Should be a continuous feed. Backups were supposed to archive everything. Gone, he confirmed, like someone wiped them out. Even the manual dispatch entries for the dry runs you two did. Nothing. Your name's there as active, but no details, no timestamps. Weird. My stomach tightened. "Any system alerts? Admin log?" He shook his head. "Clean, whoever did it knew exactly what they were doing. And it wasn't our IT guy, he's out with the flu. Haven't had any security updates or downloads in weeks." I pressed my palm flat on the table. The paper logs beneath my fingertips crisp and yellowed with age, but holding nothing of last night. "Thanks, Garcia," I muttered. I turned to leave, but he called out, "Be careful out there, Sergeant." He sounded concerned. I nodded and walked away, but his warning lingered. My next stop was the break room. Coffee and a moment of stillness before I hit the road again. I poured a cup, black, and added a single sugar. My hands trembled slightly, and the spoon clinked against the mug. I stared at the dark liquid. It was supposed to wake me. Instead, it felt like the last warm thing I'd touched for hours. Deputy Jackson walked in beside me, bleary-eyed and rubbing at his left arm, where the bruise from a bar fight still showed bluish purple. "Later than usual," he muttered, reaching for his own cup. "Night went quiet after your shift. Heard you had fun, though." I didn't reply. I'd stopped telling people about the fun. Jackson tilted his head. "You okay?" he asked. His voice was rough, like gravel. "I'm fine," I said, too quickly. He nodded, filled his mug and headed for the door. I stayed behind, turning the cup slowly, coffee sloshing against the sides. I glanced at my watch, 13:17. Lunch break was over. I set the mug down and walked out, only to catch sight of Deputy Simmons in the hallway. Simmons hadn't said a word all morning. Rare. He was staring at his locker, arms crossed. I called out, "Simmons?" He jumped, like I'd startled a deer. "Oh, Sergeant," his voice cracked. "You know, did you hear about Harris? He's not here today. No call, nothing." Harris was the fellow deputy who'd stopped talking after that one shift 2 months ago. The same shift when he came into the break room, pale as a corpse, refusing to speak about what he'd seen out on FM 109. Nothing more than that. And then he passed his badge to me and walked off duty, vanished. We never saw him again. My heart skipped. "He didn't say anything?" I asked. Simmons shook his head. "Not since he cleared out his locker, left his uniforms, his cruiser, all of it, just gone." I swallowed hard. "Weird." He looked at me, eyes wide. "You know about Harris. You saw him last night at the Pine Hill turnoff, right?" He glanced sideways. "On the footage." "Footage? There shouldn't have been any footage." The dash cam had been running and then it vanished. "Harris?" I whispered. Simmons shook his head. "I don't know." He backed away, then paused. "Be careful, Sergeant." And he left, boots echoing down the corridor. I stood alone, chest tight. I thought of Harris's pale face and empty eyes, and the way he wouldn't speak a word about what he'd witnessed. I thought of Emily, still rattled from her first shift. I thought of Garcia and his empty logs, of the missing entries. And I thought of the creatures, if you could call them that moved in and out of my headlights, slipping between worlds. I grabbed my radio mic off the desk, fished out my phone, and tried my personal channel. Dead air. I hit the trunk camera button on the console. Nothing. Blank feed. My stomach twisted. Out in the bay, my cruiser sat under the fluorescent lights like a dull tomb. I walked toward it, every step heavy. Before I reached the door, I checked the unlocked glove box. Inside, a faded photo of my wife and daughter at the county fair. I took it out, held it tight. The image blurred in my sweating fingers. I climbed in, settled into the seat, and keyed the mic. "Unit 27 to dispatch. Do you copy?" Silence. I pressed the manual record button and spoke into the microphone. "This is Sergeant Reed. I'm logging an incident. Missing dispatch logs, missing Deputy Harris, unexplained figures on Route 285 and Pine Hill turnoff. Requesting immediate backup and investigation into something." I clicked off the record, knowing it would go nowhere. I started the engine, the dash cam flickered on, green light solid. I punched the headlights, spotlight, all systems check. Everything online except the radio. Good. I needed the camera more than the mic. I eased out of the bay and onto the access drive. In the distance, I saw the chain-link gate ahead of the compound. But something on the passenger side window caught my eye. A boot print, fresh, smeared across the glass. Not mine, not Emily's. A single print. Mud dried in cracks, the outline of a lug sole. I froze, heart hammering. The world shrank to that print, 2 inches, embedded in the streaked window. I reached out, traced it with my finger. The mud was rough, but gone at the edges, like someone had rubbed it once. I looked back at the gate. It was closed, but not locked. The cable latch was undone, hanging loose. I shut off the engine, chest tight. The print gleamed in the cab light, the only proof I had left of last night's horrors. But proof didn't keep you safe. It only reminded you what was still out there. I thought about driving right to dispatch, reporting the print, the logs, Harris, everything. But the radios were dead. Even if I didn't believe it, this thing did. It could kill signals, erase data, slip through locks. I felt helpless, holding the photo of my family and sitting behind a wheel I no longer trusted. I stared at the print until the oil field lights outside flickered on. The crew starting their afternoon shift. The world beyond the station was spinning. Oblivious. Families biking home, kids chasing ice cream trucks, couples walking dogs, normal, mundane, safe. I drove out onto the street and headed home. Every few blocks I checked my side mirror. No shadows there, no pairs of boots silently pacing. But that didn't mean they weren't following me, just out of sight, out of frame. I sped through red lights until I hit the highway. The dash cam light glowed steady. If nothing else, it captured the road behind me. Whatever shape or figure or fading impression materialized there, I would record it. And maybe, just maybe, I'd build a case that proved this wasn't just exhaustion or a glitch. But as I crossed the county line, the dash cam feed stuttered for a heartbeat, just a flicker, and the green light blinked out. The lens went black, leaving only the night in my rearview mirror, empty as a man's stare when he has nothing left to say. I killed the engine on the shoulder and sat for a long moment. Headlights of distant rigs crawled past. A single coyote barked, and somewhere in the hush, I thought I heard someone breathing, soft, deliberate, waiting. I pressed my palm against the glass where the boot print had been, but it was gone, clean. I exhaled, hands trembling on the wheel. I knew that print would return, that camera would flicker back, that radio would crackle one day with the static voice calling my name. Because this wasn't a thing you could outrun or outwait. It was hunger made of shadow and silence, and it fed on the dark corners of every night shift. So I put the car in drive, steeled myself for the next run, and merged back onto the highway. Chasing night, chasing answers, chasing a dawn that might never break through the darkness I'd brought along for the ride. I didn't sleep that afternoon. Instead, I sat in the recliner at home, denim uniform still damp from last night's gravel, replaying every moment in my head. The artifacts of reality lay around me. My duty belt draped over the armrest, flashlight by my side, the faded photograph of my daughter pinned to the coffee table with a half-empty box of donuts. I kept expecting something to move, a shadow slipping across the floor, the radio hissing to life, but all I heard was the hum of the air conditioner and the distant rumble of traffic on Loop 534. At 1812, I finally climbed out of the chair, stretched my stiff back, and stepped outside for fresh air. The sun was a molten orb sinking behind the mesquite trees, painting the sky in bruised lavender and orange. A heat haze shimmered on the asphalt. I leaned against the truck, a white Ford F-150 I'd bought 10 years ago, and lit a cigarette. The smoke curled into the evening breeze, carrying with it the familiar tang of gasoline and desert dust. I inhaled deep, letting the nicotine settle in my chest, pretending it could numb the dread knotting my stomach. I pulled out my phone. No messages, no calls. I tapped through the contacts until I found Dispatch HQ. My thumb hovered over the call button. I needed to push back, needed to demand answers, needed to make noise so all this quiet wouldn't swallow me whole. But I couldn't press call. My finger hovered a moment longer, then flicked the phone off. I slipped it into my pocket and crushed the cigarette butt under my boot. Inside the house, my wife was cooking dinner. Tacos, my favorite. The aroma of seasoned beef and onions teased my senses, but I couldn't stomach it. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching her chop cilantro with rapid, practiced motions. She glanced over her shoulder. "You okay?" she asked, voice light but edged with worry. "I'm fine," I said automatically. She turned back to the sink, wiping her hands. I followed her to the kitchen island, resting my hands on the countertop. "Rough day at work?" she pressed. I closed my eyes. "Just busy." She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Dinner's almost ready," she said softly. She carried the plates to the table and sat across from me. Our daughter chirped from her booster seat, asking for her quesadilla. Normal, domestic, safe. But I blinked back memories of CB static whispering through the cruiser and the boot prints on my window. I forced a smile. "Pass the salsa," I said, raising my voice just enough. We ate in silence. My wife glanced at me between bites, waiting for some clue, but I couldn't give her any. Not yet. Later, I told myself. I'd find a way to explain, I'd get proof, and she'd believe me. After dinner, I cleared the plates and loaded the dishwasher. The clang of dishes and the rush of water were loud in the quiet house. I realized I wasn't even hungry. I drank a glass of water, then slipped on my boots again. "I'm heading out," I said. "Where?" my wife asked, alarmed. "Just going to patrol for a bit," I lied. "I need to clear my head." I grabbed my keys and jacket and slipped out before she could argue. The truck's engine fired instantly. I backed onto the driveway and turned north onto Lakeview Drive. The neighborhood was settling for the night. Neighbors walking dogs, porch lights clicking on, sprinklers hissing in manicured lawns. I kept the window down, letting the warm air whip through the cab. I punched the HVAC controls. Cold, max. I needed something to jolt me awake. I headed for State Route 285, retracing my own shifts. Mile marker 30 came first, then 29, 28. Passing the broken barn, the deserted trailer park, the washed-out checkpoint site. I scrolled through my memory, expecting to see the faceless figures lurking just beyond my headlights. But all I saw were bleachers, pumping units, and telephone poles. At mile marker 27, I killed the engine and climbed out. The night air sunk into my bones. I checked my flashlight, dead batteries. I cursed, patted my pockets, and found my spare in the center console. I clicked it on. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the cracked pavement and the fence line. No shapes, no signs. I swept the light up the embankment toward the collapsed arch. Nothing. Just the rusted skeleton of metal and stone. I pressed my palm against the fence wire, recalling the gouges I'd found earlier. The fresh, silvery slashes where someone had torn through. The metal felt rough under my glove. I turned to the arch, shining my beam on the hillside. Still empty. I exhaled. Maybe I'd imagined it all. Maybe the long hours in silence had warped my mind. But then I heard it. A whisper, low and rasping, carried on the wind. My name. Reed. My heart thundered. I spun around, light bouncing across the gravel like a panic-stricken pulse. Nothing. The hill loomed above me, dark and silent. My breath came in short bursts. I called out, voice rough, "Who's there?" The only answer was the rustle of mesquite leaves and a lone cricket's chirp. I clicked off the flashlight and pressed my back against the cruiser's tailgate, trying to make myself small, silent. I listened, straining for any sound. The wind shifted, then died. So did the silence. A new sound, a soft scuff, came from a few feet away. Metal on gravel. Not timid, but deliberate. I didn't move. The scuff came again, closer, then another, right beside me. My heart seized. I flicked on the light. There, at the side of the truck, pressed against the passenger door, was a handprint, smudged in mud. 5 fingers splayed. The print was dark, wide, and too big to be mine. I dropped the beam to ground level. Scattered boot prints surrounded me, some overlapping mine, all leading up to my cab. I swallowed and straightened, shining the beam upward. On the roof of the cruiser I saw the shape of boots, then legs, then the empty darkness of a torso. The brim of a hat caught the light for a split second before it ducked behind the ladder rack and melted into shadow. I spun around, but nothing moved. I grabbed for my radio, but it was silent. I fumbled for the door handle and yanked it open, sliding into the cab and slamming it shut. I locked every latch, then buried my hand on the dash cam mount. The green light was steady. Good, I needed that. I rammed the key into the ignition. The engine roared, tires spinning on gravel. I threw the truck into drive and spun off the shoulder, fishtailing until I hit pavement. The beam from my headlights cut a swath through the darkness, but I couldn't shake the feeling those boots were still balancing on the roof, watching me go. I drove hard toward Beeville, leaving the ghost of the checkpoint behind. The CB crackled, static, a sigh, then a low whisper that crackled into intelligible words. "You can't run." The voice was my own, deep and broken, like a recording of my nightmares. I slammed my hand on the dash, rattling the console. The radio cut out. Silence reclaimed the night. I checked the mirror. No rooftop, no shapes lurking in the back seat, just the empty cab and the road stretching ahead. My eyes stung with tears I refused to shed. My throat felt raw. But I knew one thing. This wasn't a game. It wasn't exhaustion or hallucinations. Something was hunting me, learning my roots, mocking my fear. It wanted to break the routine I clung to pull the seams of reality apart. I cursed under my breath, tapped the mic. "Unit 27 to dispatch, acknowledge." Nothing. So I switched the channel to emergency, nothing. Then I punched the console's manual record button, tapped my hand on the receiver and spoke, voice trembling. "This is Sergeant Reed. If anyone hears this, if these recordings survive, know this. I'm being followed by something that isn't human. It kills signals, erases logs, scratches metal for sport. It knows me, it knows my wife and daughter. It's watching my house, my shift, my life. I don't know why, but I will not let it find them." I clicked off the recorder, hands shaking. I eased off the gas and coasted into the station parking lot at 1945. The lot was nearly empty, only one other cruiser, headlights off. I killed the engine and sat in the dark cab, listening. No whispers, no static, just breath and blood pounding in my ears. I traced the route home in my mind. Tomorrow, I'd call it in. Tomorrow, I'd force someone to believe me. Tomorrow, I'd get back up and retake control of the night. But for now, I sat and waited, flashlight in hand, ready for the next scuff of boots on gravel, the next whisper through the radio, the next mark on my world that would prove the darkness was alive, and that it knew exactly where to find me. I woke to the shrill ring of my phone at 2:17, the blue digits on the bedside alarm clock bleeding into the darkness of the room. My wife's number flashed on the screen. For a split second, I considered ignoring it. Another late-night check from her. Another round of questions I couldn't answer. But I slid out of bed, fingers stiff, and swiped to answer. "Reed?" Her voice was tight, almost whispering. "Yeah," I said, voice raw. "What's wrong?" I heard something on the baby monitor. My blood ran cold. The monitor sat in our daughter's room, a thin capsule of white plastic with a single amber light. I thought back to last night's recordings, the whispers, the static, or maybe they'd been in my head. My throat closed. "What did you hear?" I asked. A voice, Reed, like your voice, calling her name. My fingers tightened on the phone. "Are you sure?" "Yes." I paused it. "You have to hear it. Please come home." I glanced at the clock, 2:19. My shift was still hours away, but nothing mattered except getting there. I'm on my way. I killed the call and threw on clothes, jeans, boots, my patrol jacket. I snagged my flashlight and keys, and just like that, the veneer of home disappeared. I was back on the road, headlights carving a path through the midnight black, each beat of the windshield wipers echoing the thud of my heart. I sped through the empty streets, ignoring speed limits, red lights, my own breathing. The dash cam's green light glowed in the corner of the mirror, my sole witness. I flicked on the radio. Dead. Why did I expect anything different? The night had taught me not to trust wires and frequencies. At mile marker 30 on Route 285, I remembered the broken barn. No locks. The memory of last week's inspection squatted in my mind, dust motes dancing in the beam of my flashlight until the shape of a man had appeared in the doorway, face shrouded. I hadn't returned. I thought about it now, slowing the truck as I passed. Didn't matter. I had a home to save. I barreled down the highway until the streetlights of Lakeview subdivision blazed ahead. A lone street lamp flickered at our corner, casting more shadow than light. I skidded to the curb, killing the engine. The cab was silent. I stared at the house, windows dark, and planned my approach. I didn't trust keys or locks anymore, but I had to try. I clicked the truck door open and closed it behind me. The wind carried a faint sound, laughter. A second later, it shifted into a whisper. "Daddy?" My chest seized. I gripped the flashlight like a weapon and strode up the walkway toward the front door. The porch felt wrong under my boots, boards creaking in a pattern that sounded like footsteps pacing. I lifted the flashlight to the door. The peephole was clouded, and something had smeared mud across it in broad strokes. I wiped it clear with my sleeve. No sign of forced entry. I exhaled. That was good. Unless the thing had phased through walls, like in my nightmares. I turned the doorknob. Locked. I clicked the key and heard the tumblers release. The door swung inward with a muted creak, and I called out, "Honey, I'm home." My own voice sounded brittle. Silence answered. I flicked on the hall light. It buzzed. The living room was empty. Chairs overturned, no sign of struggle. Kids' drawings strewn on the floor. Rainbows, stick figures. A house with 3 hearts under it. My daughter's handprint was the smallest, smudged in red crayon. I swallowed hard and moved toward the stairs. I paused at the foot of the steps, flashlight raised. Every second stretched. Upstairs, I heard it. The soft click of the baby monitor speaker cutting on. I sprinted up 2 steps at a time. My reflection in the landing window flickered past me. Hair mussed, eyes wild. Outside my daughter's room, the door was ajar, only enough for a sliver of darkness to leak out. The monitor lay on the floor, screen lit with a pale glow. Static hissed from it in a scratchy breath. Then a child's giggle whispered through the speaker. I kicked the door open. The room light was off. The crib lay at an angle from the corner. The mobile's music box hung silent overhead, the painted animals frozen in mid-spin. My daughter's blanket lay on the floor, and half of her stuffed bunny was shoved behind the mattress. I stepped forward, heart hammering so loud I half expected to hear it over the monitor's hiss. I scanned the room. No child, no wife, just shadows pooling in the corners. The whisper crackled again. "Daddy!" I spun, sweeping the flashlight beam across the hallway. Nothing. Then, out of the corner of my eye, movement at the doorway. A shape perched on the banister, impossibly tall, arms draped. The beam caught the brim of a hat. Face was gone. "No," I hissed, voice cracking. I flicked the light directly at it. For a heartbeat, it stood, silent and still. Then it sprang down, too fast, too fluid, and vanished into the darkness beyond the room. I raced past it, down the hall, calling out my wife's name, my daughter's name. I flung open the bathroom door, empty. The guest room, empty. The linen closet, nothing but towels. Adrenaline battered me. The monitor clamored behind me, hissing, moaning. I lunged at the nursery door again. Something swiped at my ankle. I tumbled forward, crumpling to the floor. My flashlight skittered across the carpet, beam bouncing wild. I crawled for it, grabbed it, and shone upward. A dark shape hovered at the ceiling, limbs splayed like a grotesque spider. The beam cleared its form, long coat, trousers, endless black where a face should be. I screamed, the sound ripping through my chest. The shape slammed into me, weightless but crushing my lungs. The monitor shattered on the floor, static bursting in all directions, and the last thing I saw before the light died was its hat falling to the carpet, brim down, empty, waiting. When I came to, I was on the floor, sunlight pouring in through the windows. My wife stood over me, tears streaming, phone in hand, emergency services en route behind her. My daughter's blanket was clutched in her arms. "I heard you scream," my wife sobbed. "I called 911. I tried to speak, but my throat wouldn't work. I held out my hand, pointing to the doorway. "It's gone," I rasped. "She's gone." My wife's eyes widened in horror, but I shook my head. It's gone. The paramedics arrived and tended to me. They asked questions, scribbled notes, I muttered fragments, missing radio logs, boot prints, static voices, shadows in my daughter's room. They smiled politely, but I saw the doubt in their eyes. They wheeled me onto a stretcher and into the ambulance. Lights flashing, siren quiet in the bright morning. I watched my house recede in the rear window. The front door stood open, a deep darkness yawning within. I didn't know what awaited inside. My wife, my girl. A darkness that wore a hat on its head and smiled with empty eyes. As the ambulance pulled onto the highway, I stared at my reflection in the glass. Blood dried on my forehead, uniform stained, eyes haunted. The dash cam on the cruiser had fallen off during the chaos, its green light dark. No record, no proof, nothing but the raw memory of that gasp of terror, and the question that echoed in my mind louder than sirens. What was it looking for? I never thought I'd still be on the road at my age, driving miles of blacktop under a dome of stars I can't see through the windshield. But here I am, cruiser lights off, engine humming like a tired heartbeat, and the Texas sky pressing down so hard it feels solid. It's 1:17 a.m. on a Tuesday, though any day feels the same after 30 years. I'm east of Van Horn now, where the trucks thin out and all you hear is the wind rattling the trailer park chain-link fence by the old Sinclair station. My radio's dead quiet, CB static and nothing else. I lean back in the seat, the vinyl planting sweat between me and my duty belt. There's a pair of stray dogs that follows me sometimes, picking at roadkill half a mile back, but tonight I don't see them. Nothing moves. I check my watch again and radio dispatch. Beeville, this is Unit 42. Traffic's clear heading north on SH281. No answer. That's not unusual. Sometimes channels go silent when the shift change ends and the next dispatcher clocks out. But tonight a knot tightens in my chest. I should be asleep right now. My wife would be too, if I were lucky enough to have been back home at midnight. But we don't talk much anymore. Not about work, not about anything. She understands it's safer to stay distant than to get pulled into whatever I've dragged home for decades. I step out onto the gravel shoulder. The ground crunches under my boots. My flashlight cuts a narrow beam into the oil field scrub. Broken pump jacks, rusted tanks, a lone pickup parked crooked beside a locked gate. I flick it to low, conserving battery. These fields are full of weird calls at 3 a.m. Every time I roll through here, I pray it's just another trespasser looking for copper or some kid daring his buddies. Tonight, I'm here because the deputy before me, Garcia, quit 3 days ago and hasn't come back. They told me he requested reassignment and might transfer to Kerrville. They didn't ask why. I heard he went silent after a night shift at the Eagle Flat crossover, that he's been staring off into space ever since, and nobody's dared to question him. I walk the fence line, footfalls soft, listening for that whisper of movement. Out here, the only sound should be pump jack gears slowly clanking in the breeze, the distant hum of I-10 traffic like rolling thunder. But I catch something else. Breathing. Low, deliberate, maybe 10 feet behind me. I swing my light back. Nothing but shadows and a swaying chain. My pulse flickers faster. "Sir," I say, voice tight, "I've got you on camera. Step out where I can see you." No answer. My radio crackles once. A faint cough of static and then nothing. I swallow the lump in my throat. Cameras don't lie, but sometimes vision fails you in the dark. I clear my throat and call dispatch again. Silence. I scan the horizon. No rigs running, no glow of a burner flare, just a pale moon drifting through high clouds. I pull my Glock free, chamber empty. I haven't loaded live rounds in months. It's a reminder of the rules. No shots unless it's life or death. But I slot in a round just in case. The click echoes like a promise neither of us wants to keep. I creep forward, light hopping across the scrub at knee level, heart thudding louder than my footsteps. Every muscle screams to bolt back to the cruiser to lock the doors, but I force myself on. At the edge of the gravel, I spot fresh footprints pressed into the dust. Big boots, maybe a size 12, heading toward the padlocked gate. No vehicle tracks, just those prints, as if someone climbed over the fence. I crouch, pressing the barrel of my service weapon against my palm. The footprints stop 6 feet past the fence, halfway between pump 2A and the rusted wellhead. The prints are wet, like the soil turned sticky by rain days ago, but there's no rain tonight. I feel that old dread humming through me, the same dread that got under Garcia's skin. I lean closer, shining my light on the prints. At the edge of the boot heel, I see a smear of something dark, glossy. Definitely not oil. My breath catches and I draw in a sharp inhale. There's a soft thump behind me again, quieter this time, almost like something letting itself down from the fence. I spin and nothing. The fence post stands silent, the chain link silhouette flickering in the light. I feel exposed, every sense on red alert, but logic keeps punching me back. Trespasser, curious teen, local kid messing around. It's always human. It's never what your mind decides in the dark. I stand and call out, "Come on out, let's do this the easy way." My voice cracks halfway through. If someone is out here, they'll have heard. If no one's out here, I'm just egging my own nerves. I step forward, cautious, my boots slipping on loose gravel. Every step kicks up dust motes dancing in my light. The dry air tastes like metal and sweat. I reach the gate, half expecting a hand to shoot through the bars, a face to peer at me between links, but it's empty. Only the padlock glinting dull orange under the beam. I jam my light through the lock, blinking at the chipped paint and the scrape marks on the chain. Nothing else. My radio remains dark, the desert utterly silent. I close my eyes for a moment, tasting the fear, feeling it seep into my bones like cold mortar. I back away to call it in, just log unfounded and head to the next call. But my radio crackles to life. A voice so weak I'm not sure I heard it right. "Unit 42, do you copy?" It's dispatch, but not their usual tone. Flat, distant, as if someone isn't quite present. I breathe out loud. "I copy, go ahead." The reply is a series of dashes, then words, clipped. "We see something, crossing, distance, coordinates, stand by." Then dead air. My finger tightens on the trigger, a bead of sweat in my ear. I flick my light, around. No movement, no shape, just the rusting steel bones of the pump jacks. I glance back toward the road. My cruiser is 100 yards off, headlights off, engine idling. It takes half a second to make the call. I'll leave the pump jack behind. This feels beyond a trespasser. I'll head south toward Van Horn, where there are other deputies, backup, somewhere with more light and less dust. As I turn, I catch a flicker, something solid, maybe 12 feet tall, just past the edge of the fence. By the time I aim my light, it's gone. I freeze. The temperature seems to drop 10 degrees in an instant. My breath puffs out in a cloud, though the air was already chilly. My heart hammers so hard I can feel it in my jaw. I take one careful step back, then another. My boots clang on the gravel. I keep my weapon low but ready, calling out again, voice tight. "This is Officer Harlan. I'm with the department. If you're out there, show yourself." No answer. And yet, I know I'm not alone. Something out there has drawn eyes on me tonight. Something that won't make the reports, that will slip back into the dark once I'm gone, leaving only footprints in the dust and a dispatch log with half-erased entries. I walk backward toward my cruiser, keeping my light on the fence line. Each step feels heavier than the last, like I'm dragging the weight of every graveyard I've ever patrolled across the desert. By the time I reach the cruiser door, the hair on my neck is standing so straight I'm sure I can hear it crackle. I slide in, lock it, and kill the lights. The instant the engine roars, the dread loosens, but it doesn't leave. My gaze snaps to the rearview mirror, but I'm alone. Just me, an array of meter lights flickering on the dash, and the memory of movement where nothing should be. I don't look back as I pull onto the highway. Sometimes, running away is the only way to stay alive. I merged onto the 2-lane ribbon of asphalt, the cruiser's tires humming against the pavement like a predictable metronome. The desert cleared, and headlights carved a tunnel of yellow into the dark. My heart still thudded in my ears, each beat reminding me of what I'd almost faced out by the pump jacks. I eased the speed down to 50, didn't want to blow right past another call. Nothing good happens by rushing through Texas nights. Dispatch crackled again, weaker this time, like the signal was receding. Unit 42. Check-in, coordinates again. I thumbed the mic. "This is Unit 42. I'm clear of your last point. Please confirm traffic advisory for Van Horn County." There was a pause, then static. The kind that sweeps out your thoughts and leaves a ringing in your head. No reassurance came. I flicked the radio off, tried turning it back on. Dead. Just like Garcia's radio, he said it cut out on him, and then nothing. I shut it down, slumped in the driver's seat, and rubbed my face. The weight in my chest settled into my diaphragm. Every muscle felt fatigued. I glanced at the clock, 1:49 a.m. Still 2 hours to go if I wanted to finish the shift at 4. I swore I'd stick to the schedule. But sticking to schedules doesn't help when the dark decides to keep its secrets. I gripped the wheel and breathed slow. Thought about my daughter, Layla, who turned 16 last month. If I'd been home at 10, instead of chasing phantom trespassers, I might have helped her with algebra. Instead, I'd be here, wrestling with what I saw and what I almost saw. Northbound, I passed the empty skeletal frames of oil derricks, looking like grave markers for a dead industry. I remembered Jacoby's farm just off County Road 12, the place where a kid nearly died in that busted irrigation ditch last summer. We'd taken his family to the hospital. Night calls like that leave pieces of you on the roadside. I flicked on my spotlight, rolled through the deep dust along the shoulder, and checked the ruined blacktop. Nothing but tire tracks leading nowhere, the ditch quiet. By the time I reached the exit for Childress, I was half wishing for another call. anything to snap me out of my own head. But crimes around here are few. A stolen ATV, cat shooters, the occasional DUI, not the high-speed pursuits or SWAT standoffs you hear about on the news. Just small-town tragedies that seep into your bones. I turned down FM 172, the road stretching skinny like a horizon line. The glow of a single streetlight marked the edge of town, a flickering halo over a crumbling welcome sign. I rolled past the town square where the courthouse clock hands had stopped at midnight years ago. Legend says the old sheriff let it rust when his daughter died in a car crash, but nobody's fixed it since. I kept my focus on the road and my dead radio, uneasy that every structure, every barn, every mobile home sat like a dark silhouette against the starless sky. This part of Texas is more shadow than substance when the street lamps go out. At the edge of Childress, the call came in on my phone. Backup requested at the Parker Trailer Park down FM 317. Someone reported screams. Why my phone? My department made us use personal lines for non-emergencies, a policy to cut costs. Great idea, I answered. Unit 42, what's the address? The dispatcher's voice wavered, tight. Trailer 14, disturbance. Possible assault. Sirens may be heard. No mention of whether the dispatcher was still listening on the department's radio, like they'd wash their hands of this, passed the buck off to me. I clicked off, my stomach tightening. I turned onto the gravel drive. The trailer park sat in a low hollow, trailers spaced too close, with flimsy steps and sagging porches. A chain-link fence, rusting at knee height, looped around the perimeter. Every trailer was dark, save one at the far end, numbered 14, with a pale light coming from the window, soft, like a TV set left on. I killed the cruiser's headlights and edged forward. My spotlight illuminated a single set of footprints in the dirt. Bare feet, small, probably a woman's. They led straight to trailer 14. I felt the hair on my arms bristle. My stomach churned, playing tricks as the footprints glowed under my beam. No shoes, no tire tracks, nothing to say how someone arrived there. I stepped out, boots sinking in loose gravel. The air was still. Too still. No insects chirping, no crickets clicking. Just a strange hush that pressed against your ears. I pulled out my flashlight, emptied the chamber of training rounds, and slotted in real ones. Then I toggled the light to strobe for a second, keeping them blinded, just in case. I approached the trailer, each step cautious. The vinyl siding was dusty, worn, and the door had no deadbolt, just a flimsy latch. No porch light, no welcome mat, just a cold, bare threshold. I scanned the yard, overturned lawn chair, a cracked beer bottle, one lone shoe lying in the grass. The footprints ended at the door. I took a deep breath, lifted my free hand and knocked. "Police," I said, voice steady. "I'm here to help. Open up." Nothing. I shifted my light to peer through the window. Faded curtains hung limp. Inside, I saw the flicker of a TV casting pale light, a threadbare couch, and a coffee table strewn with takeout boxes, and one figure, leaning forward, head in their hands, shoulders shaking. I jiggled the handle, locked. I radioed for a key holder but got only silence in response. I set my shoulder against the door, wedged my foot, and pushed. The latch opened with a metallic click. I stepped inside, gun raised, flashlight dancing across the interior. The air reeked of stale beer and sweat. The TV was on mute, static on the screen. The figure on the couch didn't look up. I circled slowly, scanning for threats. No weapons visible, just the figure, curled up, trembling. "Ma'am?" I said. She flinched, twisting around. Her eyes were puffy, tears tracking dark lines down her face. "Sir, please," she whispered, "please help me." I lowered my weapon a bit. "What happened?" She swallowed. He came back." She choked on her words. "He said he'd been gone, but he was back. I heard him in the yard." She pointed toward the door. I glanced at the window. No one outside. I shone my light into the yard. No footprints, no silhouette, no sign of anyone behind me. Just the black night pressing against the glass. I turned back. The woman sat trembling, voice fading into sobs. I knelt beside her, radio in hand. "Ma'am, are you hurt? Do you need medical?" She shook her head, too afraid to speak. I stayed there for a long moment, granting her arm until her breathing steadied. Then I called dispatch again, this time on my phone. No more dead radio. "Unit 42 to dispatch, I need EMS at trailer 14 in Childress. Possible assault. Female victim, no visible injuries but severe distress. I'm standing by." Silence, then acknowledgement. I settled her on the couch, pulled my jacket over her shoulders. I felt the weight of another mystery pressing in, footprints leading here, but none leaving, a stranger inside her home. But who? And how? My pulse slowed a fraction. I checked my watch, 2:12 a.m., another sleepy hour stretching ahead. I ran a hand through my hair, tasted dust and coffee from earlier. The woman's eyes flicked toward the front door, then over my shoulder, as if expecting something, or someone, to step out. I patted her arm. "Help's coming," I said. She nodded, chin wobbling. I stood and swept the room with my light again. The TV static crackled low, as if someone whispered through it. I blinked and heard it. The faintest click of a hinge in the darkness behind me, like that pump jack gate, but indoor. I spun. The back door was ajar, swinging slightly, letting in a sliver of a hallway blacker than the room. My flashlight bounced to the hall. No footprints, no shape, just that stale odor of fear and stale sweat. I gripped my weapon tight, thumb brushing the safety. The woman's whimper nudged me back, steadied myself. "Stay here," I said. "I'm going to check." She nodded again, eyes wide. I edged toward the back door. Light paused on the threshold. I imagined the kid who ran from me at the pump jack, but this was a trailer, no fence to vault. Whoever opened this door walked in like they belonged. I stepped out, gun at the ready, into the corridor. It smelled like old carpet and fear. I listened, heart pounding. I heard it again, soft breathing, too deep, too deliberate, just past the next door. I crept forward, foot on worn linoleum, my light flickering across 3 closed doors. The last one, brown laminate, had a small vent at its base. I crouched, aimed the beam through it. Inside, I saw only darkness, but the breathing came louder. Then something shifted, a silhouette at the far wall, back to me, slack shoulders. I lunged forward, hand on the knob. It was unlocked. I swung it open, swept light inside. The room was empty. A twin bed, sheets tossed like someone bolted. A dresser drawer pulled halfway out. No person, no sign of struggle, just dust. And then I felt it. A presence behind me. A slow exhale close to my ear. I whirled. Nothing. But I heard it again, closer. An impossible whisper, raspy and low. "Go back." I spun around, every nerve screaming, but there was only the open door and the dim hallway. The trailer was silent now, the woman's TV gone off, her sobs stilled. My radio was dead. The only sound was my own breathing. I backed out, heart slamming, and closed the door gently, left it as I'd found it. I jogged back to the living room where she sat, wide-eyed. I scooped her up and carried her outside, gun raised, flashlight swinging. Not a soul in sight, just that empty black field of trailers and dark windows. I set her down by the cruiser, locked her inside, and watched her face as I circled back to the trailer. My ribs ached from tension. This wasn't a trespasser thriller. It was something else. Something that slipped through walls and vanished like steam. I holstered my weapon and watched the door. I'm not sure which of us was more terrified, me or her. But when I laid eyes on that dark hallway inside, I knew one thing. No report would capture it. There'd be no higher-ups believing footsteps behind them when no one's there. No written log that won't get erased. And that whimper at the door, that voice in the dark saying, "Go back," it doesn't ever leave you once you hear it. I climbed in, felt the cruiser's seat warm, and killed the engine. I stared through the windshield at the trailer's pale light, thinking about how easily reality can fail you after midnight. Then I drove off into the night again, knowing I'd never look at empty hallways the same way. I put another 20 miles of highway behind me before I finally started feeling the edges of my mind closing in. The road stretched out like a black ribbon beneath my tires, dotted only by the occasional reflector post. Above, the sky was a deep bruise, with no stars showing, like someone had painted the heavens to hide whatever prowled below. My radio remained silent, the phone dead, and dispatch had stopped sending updates. I wondered if anyone was listening at all, or if I'd slipped off the grid entirely. I eased into the faded yellow glow of Van Horn's lone streetlight, one lamppost planted at the county courthouse entrance. The town sat at the crossroads of Interstate 10 and US 90, but at this hour it felt abandoned, as if everyone who lived here had fled into the night. A single diner sign blinked "Open" in red, but the building looked empty. I thought about grabbing coffee, but my nerves were raw. Caffeine would only sharpen the fear. Instead, I steered toward the sheriff's substation, a stucco building with barred windows and a locked front door. The neon badge above the entrance flickered once and died. I parked out front and killed the engine, letting the cruiser's ambient glow fill the cab. The air conditioner clicked off, leaving me sweating in silence. I checked my watch, 2:41 a.m., a quarter till the shift midpoint. I should have been finishing paperwork, not chasing echoes in the dark, but there'd been no paperwork since the pump jack prints, no log entries since the trailer park incident. My shift log was blank beside assault call, victim safe, and that was it. No notes on phantom footprints or whispering hallways. The department wouldn't want those in their reports. I stepped out and locked the cruiser. The air felt heavy, like the desert had exhaled and left every ounce of heat behind. I walked to the building's side, where a back door sat under a dim security light. I tried the handle, locked. I yanked on a window grate beside it and peered inside. Empty office chairs, a darkened bullpen, and a wall-mounted CCTV monitor, screen blank. No security staff on duty, everyone else was out on patrol, or worse, off shift. I pressed my ear to the cool metal door. Nothing. No hum of a generator, no distant chatter. I pulled a small service key from my pocket, one I'd stashed for emergency access, and unlocked it. Inside, the fluorescent bulbs flickered, spitting intermittent light. I clicked on the monitor bank. Screens remained black. I tapped each feed, nothing. I frowned. The security system was live. I checked it on roll call, but something had gone offline. Or someone had turned it off. I replaced the key, retraced my steps down the hallway, and reached the dispatch room. The radio bank sat cold and silent. Dispatcher's headset resting on the console like a skull on a tombstone. The dispatch log lay open, a sheet of paper with scribbled coordinates, then half-erased lines trailing into nothing. I leaned over it. Entries for 117, pump jack trespass, 212, trailer 14 assault. Then the next line at 2:30 was a jagged scrawl. Something crossing I-10 near mile 136. That was new. I hadn't heard that. My hands tingled. I scanned the room. A single cup of lukewarm coffee sat on the console. Someone had been here recently. I rifled through the drawers, looking for a radio mic. Nothing. Then I noticed the desktop computer with its screen on the login prompt. I tapped a key. No response. I tried hard reboot. Lights on the CPU blinked once, then went dark. The entire system had been shut down. Whoever had been here had wanted to erase their presence. I closed the door, heart banging. I needed to get back on the road. I returned to the cruiser just as the diner sign across the street blinked back to life. Red, open, glowing in the window. I froze, watching it strobe against the empty streets. The building looked deserted, the glass front windows reflecting my own face. I wondered if I'd been seeing things, imagining movement at the edge of my vision. But then I caught it. A dark shape standing in the doorway. Tall, thin, shoulders hunched. It didn't move. I tensed, hand drifting toward my Glock, but I hesitated. If I opened fire at someone standing in a doorway, I'd have questions in the morning. Officers who investigated haunted buildings get called unstable. The light blinked off, and the figure vanished. My pulse doubled. I'd give anything for backup, or for my radio to work. I climbed in and locked the doors. I sat for a moment, debating coffee against fleeing. Then I opened the city map on the seat beside me. My next call was a routine noise complaint at a mobile home park south of town. Nothing urgent, but it broke the silence. I started the engine and rolled out toward FM 1434. The road narrowed to a single lane, bordered by mesquite brush and the occasional weathered sign warning of rattlesnakes. My spotlight cut through the gloom, and I noticed fresh tire tracks leaving the pavement, shimmering like oil in the headlight glow. They led off into the brush, heading toward an abandoned border station dug into the hillside. I'd never heard of anyone using that old site. It was decommissioned years ago. I switched off the spotlight and let the cruiser glide past the turnoff. Didn't want to investigate. But then my curiosity outweighed my caution, and I pulled a 3-point turn. Leaving the headlights on low, I backed onto the dirt track. The tires churned grit as I followed alongside a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. The gate lay open, twisting on its hinges. No warning signs, no barriers to stop traffic. It looked like someone had opened it in a hurry. I clicked off the engine and slipped out, boots crunching. My flashlight beam landed on overturned chairs, flattened cardboard boxes, an empty propane tank. The whole place was a makeshift camp. I swallowed. Human habitation here meant someone wanted to stay hidden. I swept the beam over the old customs booth, its windows boarded. Inside, I saw the rusted form of a CB radio sitting on the desk. I approached, light catching the peeling paint. The mic lay on the floor, coiled cable frayed. I picked it up, thumb brushing the PTT switch. It didn't click. I tapped the side. The cable sparks, but silent. Then I heard rustling behind me. I spun, shining the light into the open compound. Nothing but a cluster of large shade trees lining the perimeter. I stepped forward, and my boot struck something. I looked down. A discarded patrol cap, faded blue with a tarnished badge pinned on the front. Not mine, not any local department. The badge read, Border Patrol Agent, though the cap belonged to someone else, worn and stained. I lifted it, inhaled the sharp odor of sweat and dust. My blood ran cold. Border Patrol units use different channels, but sometimes we cross paths. But why would an agent leave their cap behind? Panic rose in my throat. I dropped the cap and spun, aiming my light back toward the fence line. The fence was empty, the gate hanging wide. I thought of the footprints at the oil field, the whispers in the trailer park hallway. I felt them here again, eyes in the shadows, watching. I ran back to the cruiser, the cap, forgotten in the dirt, and slammed the door shut. Inside, I checked the rearview mirror, nothing in sight. The world outside was still, the fence, the dark trees, the empty booth. I killed the lights and eased back onto FM 1434, heart racing. I pressed my right hand against the dash, feeling the pulse of the cruiser's engine. I glanced at the map. My noise complaint was still 10 miles south. I could ignore it. I could drive straight to the station, end my shift early, but I didn't. I flipped on the radio. Dead. The phone. Dead. The world was broken, the night untrustworthy, and no one was coming for me. So I kept driving, toward the mobile home park, toward the next call, toward whatever would keep me busy until the sun climbed over the horizon. Because in these hours, inertia beats fear. Every mile I put behind me is a mile further from what I've seen. And whatever it is, it's out there, slipping through the dark, leaving only questions and half-erased footprints in its wake. I reached the mobile home park at 3:08 a.m., the gravel crunching under the cruiser's tires like a warning bell. Rows of single-wide units sprawled between sparse streetlights, each one a pale rectangle of darkness in the desert night. I switched the spotlight on the roof to high beam and crawled along the main drive, scanning for any sign of noise. There was none. No music blaring, no shouting, no fight in progress. The air felt unnaturally still, the kind of hush that presses in on you until your eardrums hum. I cut the spotlight off, rolled to a stop near Lot 22 where the caller lived. The door had a flickering porch light, the kind that never quite makes it through the bulb dying. I clipped on my flashlight to the front pocket of my vest and grabbed the radio mic, dead weight like the rest of my comms. I cleared my throat, pressed the call button on my cruiser's speaker. Unit 42 to dispatch, assault call, possible disturbance. I'm on scene at trailer 22 FM 1434. Please confirm ETA for backup. Nothing but static, the kind of static that gives you goosebumps. I stepped out into the gravel, boots sinking into loose stones. A stray breeze tugged at my uniform, carrying dust and the faint scent of diesel. I approached the trailer, the siding wallpapered with tacky holiday decals, Santa faces half peeling. The window panes were dark. I knocked on the door frame. Childress County Sheriff's Office. Open up, please. No answer. I tried the door handle, locked. I circled to the window nearest the cabin's corner. Sliding my light across the glass, I saw nothing inside at first. Then I noticed a shadow moving near the far wall, a slumped shape shifting like it was trying to get comfortable. I crossed to the door again, keyed my radio mic. Unit 42, advise you've got something in progress. Silence. I jiggled the door and heard a soft click. Unlocked. I thanked some unspoken god and slowly opened it. The interior light flickered on and off as I stepped inside, casting the trailer in strobing half-illumination. The air smelled like stale sweat and something rank. Rotting food, maybe. I raised my flashlight and weapon in tandem, moving down the narrow hallway toward the living area. On the couch sat a man, hunched over, hands bound in front of him. His head lolled side to side as he muttered something I couldn't catch. His shirt was torn, faint bloodstain near the collar. I knelt beside him, tapping his shoulder. He jerked upright, eyes wild and unfocused, mouth opening to speak, but no sound came out. He stared at me like he didn't know who I was. I pressed the radio mic against my chest and tried again. Unit 42 needs EMS and backup at mobile home 22. Melee victim showing signs of assault, possible head trauma. The static hiccuped, but no reply. I cursed under my breath. Of course, I returned focus to the man. "Sir, can you hear me?" I asked. He blinked rapidly and licked his lips. I shone my light higher, noticed fresh bruises along his jaw and neck, purple and angry. He opened his mouth, a raspy whisper. It's him." He tried to tug at the ropes, but winced. He came back. I froze. I recognized the panic in that voice. It mirrored the victim at the trailer park earlier, the dread that something returned after vanishing. I placed my hand on the man's shoulder. "Who?" He swallowed hard, gaze shifting to the hallway behind me. "The one in the dark." I turned to sweep the beam down the hallway. The kitchen door was ajar. My light caught the edge of it, a slight swaying motion. I tracked the beam toward the open door. Nobody there. I moved closer, weapon up. The kitchen was deserted, stale dishes in the sink, an open cabinet door. The floor speckled with what looked like dust, but the kind of dust that clings like ash. My flashlight picked up a few scuff marks on the tile, as if someone had dragged a heavy object. I paused, listening. My heartbeat thundered. Then I heard it. A low creak, like a floorboard settling, spun and chased the sound into the next room, what looked like a makeshift bedroom. The door lay in pieces on the floor, hinges broken, wood splintered. I stared at the destruction. No signs of forced entry from outside, only this interior damage. Whoever, it, had been in here moved through walls. My knuckles whitened on my flashlight handle. I stepped back toward the living area, mind racing. The bound man on the couch was breathing hard, tears glinting in his eyes. He said... His voice broke. He said, "Get out." The words pressed with a familiarity that sent ice through my veins. I forced myself to speak. "I'm going to get help," I said. He nodded, but his eyes stayed fixed on the bedroom door. Don't go in there again," he said in a whisper. I swallowed and stood. The trailer felt suffocating. I crossed to the front door, hand on the knob. Before I could turn it, the porch light outside went out. I froze, blood roaring in my ears. A soft thump sounded on the roof above me. I looked up, saw nothing but corrugated aluminum. Then the thump again, slow and measured, like footsteps pacing an attic. I yanked the door open and dashed outside, adrenaline spiking. The night air hit me like a wall, full of starlight and dust. I half expected to see someone on the roof. Someone perched above me, but there was nothing. My flashlight swept the top of the trailer. No footprints, no silhouette, just empty corrugated panels glinting in the moonlight. I turned back toward the couch where the man sat, his eyes wide and filled with fear. He mouthed, "Run!" but made no sound. I backed away, keeping my eyes on the trailer. The world felt distorted. The gravel beneath my boots, the distant hiss of desert wind, and that sinister quiet that screamed of hidden watchers. I climbed back into the cruiser, hands shaking so hard I nearly dropped my keys. I locked the doors and sat, staring at Trailer 22's darkened silhouette. The bound man's gaze haunted me, but what rattled me most was the thought that whatever prowled these shadows was not human, not someone I could chase down with conventional tactics. It moved through walls, appeared and vanished on its own terms, and spoke with a voice that I couldn't place. I started the engine at 3:22 a.m. and drove away without looking back. The cruiser's headlights cut through the night as I steered onto the main road, the Mobile Home Park disappearing in my rearview mirror. I didn't call for backup. No one would believe what I just found. I didn't submit the evidence. No photographs of dented doors or ash-like dust. There'd be no report of blows against the roof or footsteps pacing above. There would only be the two victims with eyes dulled by terror and the memory of something that should not exist. I drove on, the road unspooling toward Childress once more. My mind churned. Memories of a fellow deputy who stopped answering calls, the man in the trailer telling me to run, the footprints that led nowhere, the whisper on the CB radio urging, "Stand by." I rounded a curve, my elbow brushing the open map on the passenger seat, and realized I was ready to call it. End the night early, hand off the shift. But something kept me driving, a stubborn refusal to let this break me, a duty ingrained too deep to ignore. The highway stretched silent ahead, highway reflectors guiding me through the darkness. My thoughts drifted to the cemetery patrol years ago, how I'd seen a figure glide between stones, vanish into fog. The echo of a whisper behind me telling me to leave. I gripped the wheel tighter. I'd run from that shift too. But here, on this graveyard of trailers and pump jacks, the running never felt far enough. I glanced at the cruiser dash, 3:45 a.m., a quarter hour until shift's end. The sun would rise soon, or so they said. But dawn never felt like salvation. It only pulls back the curtain on a night that never truly ends. I exhaled, squared my shoulders, and steered north toward the station. I'd finish the paperwork, log the assault, note the disturbance, and leave out the rest. Some things weren't meant for reports. Some horrors were better left unspoken. Yet, as I drove, a flicker on the horizon caught my eye. An old barn silhouette, the rickety door hanging off its hinges. My blood ran cold, thinking of those empty barns I'd passed. Would there be another call? Another place where walls can't hold what stalks the dark? I slowed, heart hammering. For a moment, I considered pulling over, confronting it one last time, but the rational side of me clenched tight. I turned the spotlight away and pressed on. Night's secrets still had a few stops left before daylight, and I was determined to see them through. Even if it meant threading the needle between reason and madness, I would not quit. There was duty in driving through shadows, in shining a light where nothing wants to be seen, even if that light only casts more darkness in your mind. Because as log reports and radio logs will never show, some truths only surface when sanity frays, and I'd spent too many years chasing those truths to stop now. The sun was coming, but until then, someone had to keep the road alive with headlights cutting through the dark, and I was that someone. I cruised back onto US 281, the road's centerline melting into darkness ahead, and tried to steady my breathing. My hands were slick on the wheel from sweat and dust. The assault at the trailer park, the broken bedroom door, the footsteps overhead, it all felt like the same thing creeping through the Texas night, slipping through walls and waiting in shadows. I glanced at the dash clock. 4:02 a.m. My shift officially ended 2 minutes ago, but I sat frozen, suddenly unwilling to call it quits. Behind me, the mobile home park faded into night. Ahead, the oil fields stretched on. I flicked on the cruiser's spotlight briefly to check the road shoulders. Empty, except for the scratch of mesquite silhouettes against the horizon. I cut it off and slipped onto the shoulder, killing the engine. The canyon of silence swallowed me. I unshouldered my weapon and stepped out into the warm desert air. Crickets chirped, distant coyotes yelped, and the wind whispered through dry grass. It felt almost peaceful, deceptively so. I pressed my palm against the cruiser's hood, wings of heat rising off the metal. I needed to think. I pulled my map from the console and laid it across the hood. FM roads, county lines, tiny dots marking ranches and towns I'd never heard of. I traced a finger south toward Beaver Creek Road, where a hollowed-out barn had been reported abandoned last year. Some curiosity got under my skin, a compulsion to investigate every cracked doorway and empty lot where fear might dwell. I could feel it pooling in my chest, a leaden weight. I slid back into the driver's seat, map on my lap, and punched Beaver Creek Road into my GPS. The device blinked, recalculated, and displayed a dirt track branching off to the west. I flicked on the spotlight and pulled onto the dusty road. The tires spat gravel. The cab filled with the scent of oil and old upholstery. I switched off the spotlight, let only the headlights guide me. The track narrowed, bordered by looming mesquite groves, until I reached a gate marked by 2 weathered posts. I killed the engine and stepped out again. The barn stood half a mile ahead, its silhouette jagged like broken teeth against the dim sky. I toggled the flashlight to full power and walked forward, boots crunching over sharp rocks. The gate squealed on its hinge as I pushed through. The air grew stiller, thicker, like breathing through a damp blanket. I paused at the barn's edge. Its wood was gray and splintered, the roof sagging in the middle. No signs of human activity except for one set of footprints leading up to the door and none leading away. They were deep impressions in the dust, as though someone had climbed in and vanished. I raised my light to the barn door. It was slightly ajar, as though propped half open. I called out, voice echoing, "Sheriff's office. Anyone here?" No answer. Just the groan of the wind shifting loose boards. I took a breath and shoved the door wider, weapon drawn. My flashlight beam illuminated a dirt floor strewn with animal bones and dried straw. At the far end, a lone metal drum lay on its side, dented and stained dark. The smell of mildew and something fouler, like old sweat and rusted iron, rose in my nostrils. Inside, silence held fast. I swept my light left and right. Empty stalls, a tangle of broken fence rails, a tattered rope coiled by a support beam. Nothing moved. Then I caught a flicker at the corner of the rafters. A piece of cloth draped over a beam, fluttering in the breeze from the broken roof panels. I stepped forward, heart hammering. As I neared, the fluttering slowed, then stopped altogether. The cloth hung motionless. I leaned in and saw what it was. A faded blue uniform shirt, one sleeve ripped, a chest badge pinned askew. Not mine, not any department I recognized. My chest pinched. Memories flashed. Garcia's silent face, the man in the trailer pleading, "Get out!" The whisper on the CB radio urging, "Stand by." This was another piece of the same puzzle. I reached out, thumb brushing the badge. It felt sticky, like dried blood. I jerked my hand back and shone the light on the fabric, streaks of dark red marring the sleeve. I swallowed hard, grit in my throat, and yanked the shirt free. A sudden scrape above me made me whip my head up. My light pierced a lofted hayloft platform where a shadow crouched, tall, gaunt, limbs folded unnaturally. I stumbled backward, breathing catching. It didn't move, didn't speak. Its face was obscured in darkness, but I felt its eyes drilling into me. Then it slid from the beam and vanished. No sound, just empty air where the shadow had been. My legs locked, but instinct kicked in. I sprinted for the barn door, heart raging in my temples. I burst into the open and didn't stop running until the beam of my headlights hit the cruiser. I dove in, slammed the door, and locked it. My breath was ragged, sweat and dust coating my skin. I looked back. The barn stood silent, uncluttered except for the torn shirt billowing on the ground. I shone my spotlight once more. No movement. I killed the light and fumbled the badge into my vest pocket. It felt too heavy to carry. I started the engine, hands trembling on the wheel. The GPS showed a straight shot back to Van Horn for shift change, but I didn't turn. Instead, I aimed south, toward the horizon's faint glow. The sun would rise soon, but light wouldn't save me. It never did. The darkness had footprints in it, whispers in it, and shapes that slipped through walls. I drove on, determined to see the night through to its bitter end, because I'd chased these horrors too long to quit before dawn. And somewhere back at the barn, that uniform hung limp in the dust, waiting for its next witness. I glanced at the badge pinned to my chest pocket. It read, Sheriff's Office. Underneath, in faded script, another name was scratched out. I stared at it, feeling the weight of two lives in my hand, the one I carried and the one I'd never stop hunting. The road ahead stretched empty and unkind, but I drove on, because someone had to keep the lights on the dark. And tonight, it was me. I pressed the accelerator, intent on pushing through the last leg of my shift, but the cab felt smaller than ever, every inch crowded by the ghosts I'd chased tonight. My pulse echoed in the wheel as I barreled down FM 1961 toward Van Horn, the road's edges swallowed by the desert's yawning black. The distant rumble of heavy rigs on Interstate 10 drifted in and out, like a reminder that life went on elsewhere, but not here. Not at this hour, and not after what I'd seen. My phone buzzed, a message flashed from dispatch I hadn't noticed. Night shift supervisor out. Call canceled. Report in at 0600. No mention of any help coming. I dropped the phone onto the seat, letting it clatter against the map. The details of the night pressed in on me until the only thing that mattered was getting home alive, if I could still call home. I passed the derelict Eagle Flat crossover where Garcia had his breakdown. The radio silence after that call had been deafening. I recalled how he described hearing someone breathing down the mic, someone who never spoke plain words, just whispers and clicks. We logged it as radio interference. Then he stopped coming to roll call. I kept waiting for him to show up at shift's end, talk me through it. He never did. My headlights caught the sign for a forgotten turnoff, a gravel track leading to a small, unmarked rest area. I'd patrolled it before because it was empty, a good place to catch tired truckers, but that night it felt like another mouth in the desert. I instinctively slowed, sweeping my light across the concrete picnic tables. There was no one there, only the long shadows of rusted barrels and a solitary news kiosk that hadn't been stocked in years. As I rolled past, something on the kiosk shelf caught my eye. A faded pamphlet pinned under a rock. I paused and turned the spotlight toward it, killing the engine. The silence pressed tighter. I unshouldered my weapon, grabbed the flashlight, and climbed out. The gravel shifted under my boots. I stepped toward the kiosk and picked up the pamphlet. The cover read, Nightfall in Presidio County, a Guide. Pages yellowed, corners curled. Underneath, someone had scrawled in black marker, Don't come alone. My breath caught. That had to be a joke. A prank left for deputies to find. But in this night, jokes cut deeper than knives. I flipped it open, crude line drawings of border hills, an arrow marking a safe route, and another arrow marked, Here lies the watching. The last page was smeared, words unreadable. A single grain of red stained the corner like a drop of blood. I snapped the pamphlet shut and shone my flashlight back across the rest area. Still empty, still silent. I tucked the pamphlet into my vest and climbed back in, slamming the door as if I believed the wood could keep the dark out. The engine's growl felt comforting. I cleared the map off my lap and reversed back onto the highway, the night stretching ahead like an unbroken promise. I looked at the sky. Still no hint of dawn, no promise of rescue. I passed mile marker 143, where a quarter-mile east a monster rig had wrecked last spring. I'd helped wrangle bodies from the wreckage. Blood pooled on the asphalt. I remembered the stain on my boots, how it washed off but never left my mind. I flicked the spotlight onto the shoulder, no one there. Yet my gut twisted, convinced that at any moment a silhouette might stand in the beam, waiting to step closer. I flicked on the CB out of habit, nothing but static hiss. No faint voices, no whispers. For a moment I wondered if I'd lost my mind, listening for sounds that weren't there. But I knew better. I'd heard the rasping voice in the radio, the whisper behind the cemetery gate, the raspy "go back" in the trailer park. These weren't hallucinations. They were warnings. I rounded the curve into the Van Horn city limits at 4:27 a.m. The only traffic a supply truck idling at a closed convenience store. I considered pulling off and grabbing coffee, anything to ground myself. But the neon glow through tinted windows felt too false, too bright. I didn't want light. I wanted darkness because somewhere in it I might find answers. Instead, I stayed on US 90, heading west where the county line met Jeff Davis County. Reports said a stranded motorist needed help with a flat tire on the stretch between Valentine and Marfa. That was nearly 30 miles away, a long haul for a flat, but I figured I could kill time and do something useful. It beat ending the shift early. The night road narrowed, and I passed the rounded silhouette of Sierra Blanca in the distance. My mind raced back to the barn. The shirt, the dead uniform shirt scattered along the road. Pump jack trespasser, bound man, battered trailer park victim. And now this pamphlet, an invitation or a trap. At mile marker 84, my headlights illuminated a lone figure in the distance, standing beside the road. As I drew closer, the figure stepped into the beam. A woman in jeans and a flannel shirt, hair long and dark. She held a tire iron in one hand. The other rested on her hip. She looked too calm for someone stranded. I slowed to a crawl and rolled down my window. "Ma'am," I called softly into the night. "Need help?" No answer. She didn't move, didn't speak. Her face was blank under the glow of the high beams. No fear, no relief, just emptiness. My pulse spiked. I killed the lights and clicked off the spotlight, swallowed by darkness. Then I killed the engine, heart pounding so loud I thought she'd hear it. I stepped out, gun in hand. The air was still. The only sound was the gravel shifting under my boots as I approached. I raised my flashlight to her face. She stood motionless. Then, in a voice so low I almost missed it, she whispered, "Don't trust the light." I froze. Her eyes, dark pools reflecting a distant fire, locked on me. My finger itched against the trigger, but I held back. "Who are you?" I asked. The only answer was the wind rattling the rig's mirrors across the lane. When I looked back, she had vanished. No footprints, no disturbance in the gravel. I spun around, sweeping the beam across the road. The trailer stood empty, the desert silent. I exhaled, chest heaving. The radio sparked alive for an instant. One clear word, "Stand." Then static swallowed it. I yanked on the mic, nothing. I jogged back to the cruiser and slammed the door shut. I sat behind the wheel, chest heaving, mind screaming. Every shred of training told me to call for backup, to log this, to stay put. But something deeper urged me on. An unspoken compulsion that whatever crawled these roads needed to be confronted, exposed, named. I started the engine, switched the high beams back on, and merged onto the highway. My next call was miles away, but I didn't care. Night had a way of revealing truths you couldn't unsee, and I was too far into it now to turn back. So I drove on, through the stretch of empty asphalt, past mile marker 77 where the wind gusted like exhaled breath. My radio remained dead, my phone dark, and the woman's words lingered in my mind. Don't trust the light. I leaned forward, fists clenched on the wheel. The sun was still a promise beyond the horizon, but until it broke, the darkness belonged to us. And I would chase it every mile, every call, every whisper, because if I didn't, who would? Even knowing that the dark might chase me back. I crossed into the final stretch of my shift as the first pale threads of dawn teased the horizon. US 90 unfurled ahead, straight as a ruler, flanked by endless pasture land and oil wells, standing guard like silent sentinels. My cruiser's engine hummed methodically beneath me, its steady rumble the only assurance I had that the world still made sense. The darkness had begun to peel away, but the memories of the night clung to me like burrs in denim. By 5:12 a.m., I'd reached the turnoff for Valentine, an unmarked road that curved west toward Marfa. I should have taken the direct route back to the station, but I'd learned that when things spiral beyond explanation, the straight path isn't always the safest. I flicked the spotlight on and steered onto the gravel, letting the cruiser carry me toward the lonely ranchlands. I felt the weight of the lost badge in my vest pocket, the echo of the battered shirts I'd found, and every whisper that had cut through my radio silence. They felt like calls for witness, and I'd borne them tonight. The track narrowed to a single-lane trail, punctuated by old ranch gates. Every gate I passed was open, already unlatched, as if someone expected me. Each time I drove through one, the shadow beyond the beam seemed to flicker, like a figure stepping aside just out of sight. My pulse throbbed with every marker. 5 gates so far, and no sign of tracks other than my own. No footprints led away, no vehicle imprints marked the rutted earth. It was as though I alone had been invited down this path. Ahead, a lone windmill stood against the pale sky, blades motionless in the calm morning air. I switched off the spotlight and coasted to a stop. The world held its breath. No crows crowing, no cattle lowing. Just the sound of the windmill creaking softly as the breeze began to stir. I stepped out, flashlight and weapon in hand, and listened. My breath fogged in front of me, though the air felt mild. A soft thud came from the well shaft beside the mill, like something dropping heavy onto metal. I aimed my light. The well was open, its cover lying beside it, stained dark around the edges. I peered down into the void. My light beam probed the depths. Nothing but darkness and specks of dust dancing in the beam's sweep. I leaned forward, heart pounding so loud I feared it might echo in the shaft. Then I heard it, a faint scraping, like old fingernails against wood. My spine stiffened. "Hello?" I called, voice echoing. Silence. The scraping stopped, replaced by a soft breath that rattled behind me. I whirled, flashlight carving arcs through the pale dawn. Nothing. The well lay silent. I turned back, heart hammering, and called again. "State your business!" No answer. Then, from somewhere beyond the windmill, a broken cough like someone clearing decades of dust from their lungs. I edged away from the well, scanning over the property. A weathered stone marker stood by a lone mesquite tree a few yards off, half buried in scrub. I walked toward it, boots crunching dry leaves. On the marker, etched letters were worn nearly smooth. R.K. Reynasri, 1942. The date didn't register until I touched the stone with my flashlight's beam. Over 80 years old. The well shaft beside the windmill had been part of the original homestead. This marker told me someone had been buried here long ago. Yet the well gaped open, its cover cast aside like yesterday's trash. I angled my light back to the well. The stones surrounding it were freshly disturbed, the dirt loose. Someone, or something, had exhumed this place. My stomach turned. I stumbled back toward the cruiser, head swimming with the images of the night. Phantom figures vanishing in barns, pajamas smeared with ash in trailers, the battered shirt hanging in the dust, the admonition not to trust the light. All of it pointed to something ancient, patient, stalking these forgotten places. I half expected the ground to shudder or a hand to shoot up through the well, but the earth lay still as if holding its breath. I reached the cruiser, jamming the passenger door open, and yanked the radio mic. "Dispatch, Unit 42, I'm off route. Requires investigation at an old homestead, well, coordinates." My voice cracked, but the speaker stayed silent. I pressed the PTT until my finger ached. Still nothing. Somewhere in the shadow of that windmill, the same breath rasped again, shallow, deliberate, letting me know I wasn't alone. I slammed the door shut and killed the engine. The morning light bled stronger across the plains, yet the darkness thrummed through the ground beneath me. I knew I could call for backup. File an official report on disturbed graves, stolen remains. They'd send a CSI team, maybe dig up the well. They'd plaster caution tape and take photographs. But none of that would capture the dread that wrapped around your soul when you knew someone, or something, had climbed out of an old grave to walk the land again. I slid lower in the seat, shakily removed the battered badge from my vest, and laid it on the dash. The light glinted off the nameplate, worn but still legible. Sheriff's Office, J. Harlan. I coughed, my throat dry. I thought of my daughter's goodnight prayer, keep him safe, and felt a hollow ache in my chest. How could I protect anyone from this nightmare that slipped through walls and rose from old wells? A single crow cried in the distance, and the silhouette of its cawing figure passed in front of the rising sun. I grabbed the badge, shoved it back into my vest pocket, and stared at the windmill's dark blades, now still as tombstones. My radio crackled once, just static, but I caught a whisper buried in the hiss. "Stay." It was pulled away before I could grasp it. I exhaled slowly, gripping the wheel. I had one last duty: finish my shift, return the cruiser, walk back into the bright office where the walls held no secrets. But I knew the darkness would follow me through that door, trailing footprints on the polished floor, leaving whispers in my locker. I would log a routine homestead check, note the disturbance at the well, but I would leave out the half-erased scrawl on the dispatch sheet, the flicker of shapes beyond the beams, the voice telling me to stay. Because some things aren't meant to be fully reported. They live between the lines, in the spaces where reason crumbles. And when daylight arrives, it only demonstrates how little you truly saw. I turned the key, let the engine roll, and eased back onto the gravel track. Behind me, the windmill stood silent, guard over the open well. The sun edged higher, chasing the shadows, but the hush of the desert held fast. I drove on, the badge cold against my ribs, the dawn turning to morning, and I understood that this night would never end. Because wherever the darkness gathers, it leaves behind questions that refuse to be answered, and footprints that vanish by sunrise. I've been on the road for nearly 6 years now, and I've learned the hard way that silence can be as loud as gunshots. It was March of 2024 when I first felt it, this slow, grinding dread that settled into my bones like dust in the dry West Texas wind. I was working the 1 a.m. to 7 a.m. shift out of the Van Horn substation, and that night the air was dead still, the kind of quiet that makes you jump at every whisper of your own breathing. I remember punching in at 12:47 a.m., grabbing my gear and sliding into the driver's seat of my cruiser. The dashboard lights cast an eerie glow, and the CB crackled once before going dead. No chatter from dispatch, no traffic on Highway 90, just the distant twang of a stray dog howling against a backdrop of faint, flickering highway lights. The rig was warm under my arm, the hum of the engine like a lullaby I wasn't ready to sleep through. My partner, Reyes, rode shotgun. He'd been on the force for 8 years, quiet, steady as an old barn door that doesn't creak. He glanced over at me, eyes half-lidded. "You feel that too?" he asked, his voice low. I nodded. Sometimes you get that knot in your gut. Tells you something's off before you even know what. We had exactly one call on our sheet. A welfare check at an abandoned oil field camp outside of Pecos. The report said the caretaker's nephew was last seen stumbling down the service road, raving about a voice in the dark. By the time we rolled up, it was 2:03 a.m. The old pump jacks stood like skeletal arms frozen against the moonlit sky. Cracked mud stretched between rusted barrels and a trailer park with 8 empty lots. Not a soul in sight. I killed the engine, and the stillness swallowed us whole. The only sound was the crisp click of my boots against gravel as I led Reyes toward the nearest trailer. Doors hung crooked on their hinges, paint peeling like blistered skin. One window was broken, shards glinting under my flashlight beam. I shone it inside. Empty, save for a threadbare couch and a lone candle stub, melted to a waxy puddle on the floor. I felt a prickle on the back of my neck, but the room itself was cold. No heat, no breath. "Look at this," I muttered, pointing to footprints in the dust. They were bare, small, like a kid's, leading from the couch into the back bedroom. Reyes clicked on his light and followed. We entered together. In the corner, a mattress lay torn open, stuffing spilled onto the floor like guts. No sign of any person. Just that sense of something disturbed, something that left a mark. I crouched down to inspect the floor. Circling around the footprint was a ring of candle wax, blackened at the edges, like someone had tried to trap something. Except there was no candle, no wick. Just the residue, a faded smear. Reyes cleared his throat. "You think he got spooked and ran off?" I didn't answer. The hairs on my arm were standing tall. We swept every trailer on that lot. No sign of the nephew, no signs of struggle, nothing but empty rooms and frozen candles. We called it in as an unfounded welfare check and moved on, but I couldn't shake it. The image of that wax ring stayed with me. Felt like a promise that someone, or something, was still out here watching. Back in the cruiser, the radio finally crackled to life. "Unit 23, be advised we have a reckless driver heading northbound on State 302. Reports of swerving, headlights flashing at passing cars." I eased the cruiser back onto the highway, eyes scanning the black horizon. The abandoned trailers and rusty equipment slipped past, swallowed by the night. My chest tightened at the thought that we might be chasing something dangerous. But in that moment I realized we had already encountered danger, only it wasn't brandishing a weapon. It was that slow, simmering dread that doesn't show up in any report. By the time we caught up to the reckless driver, the road was lined with mesquite trees like silent sentinels. The driver was weaving between lanes, slamming on brakes every few hundred yards. When we hit the lights, he pulled over, stepped out, shirtless, trembling, eyes wild. But he claimed he'd seen someone standing in the road, smiling, waving him back into traffic. I looked up and down the empty highway. Not a soul in sight. No footsteps, no tire tracks. Just the hum of crickets and the distant howl of those stray dogs. He wasn't lying. Whatever had spooked the kid back at the trailers was out here too, playing games with drivers. That's when I heard it. A faint whisper over the CB. not the usual static lathered with garbled voices. This was a single word, stretched out, like someone caught between breath and speech. Welcome. It cut through the silence, and for a split second both Reyes and I froze. We stared at each other, hearts pounding so hard I swear our chests rattled. Then the whisper vanished, and the CB fell silent once more. I radioed dispatch. Copy that. Be advised, possible prank. Negative on any visual, just radio. We're proceeding with caution. My voice sounded hollow. Even as we turned back onto the highway, I could still taste that word on my tongue, feel its weight pressing against my mind. We never found the nephew. We never found what made that boy bolt from the oil field trailers in the first place. But I know now that night shifted something in me. I used to think danger was a stranger holding a gun. Now I know it can be a voice, a whisper, a candle stub in a ring of dust, and it can follow you home, right into your dreams if you're not careful. I'll tell you about the second call later. For now, keep your eyes on the road, and whatever you do, don't answer the radio when it hisses your name. I didn't sleep more than an hour that morning, the whisper still echoing in my head as daylight cracked over Van Horn. I tried to shrug it off, chalk it up to morale and too many late nights, but by the time I punched back in at 1:07 a.m. 2 days later, I was already on edge. I told myself this shift would be routine, just a simple check on a stranded motorist near Childress. I was wrong. Reyes and I rolled north on State 287, headlights slicing through the darkness like a blade. The dispatcher had tagged it as a disabled vehicle at mile marker 89, but the caller didn't want to wait for a tow. He sounded frustrated, upset, like he'd been stuck for hours. I glanced at the GPS. The next exit was 3 miles ahead. We pulled over just past the mile marker, ran the tags, no flags. I clicked off the cruiser's lights and reached for my flashlight. Something about this feels off, Reyes muttered. I nodded. Nothing but prairie stretching east and west. Not a hint of traffic. The blinds of the disabled sedan reflected our flashlight's back, empty except for a single jacket dangling from the headrest. No driver. We stepped around to the driver's side. The door was unlocked. Wind rattled through a chipped window. I swallowed, reached in, and flicked on the dome light. The jacket lay folded neatly, as if someone had set it there intentionally. No footprints in the gravel, no sign of a struggle. Just emptiness. "Hey," Reyes said, scanning the radio. "Dispatch, Unit 23, we've got a solo car, no one around." Plate matches, no occupants. Static. Then a click. A voice, low, raspy, came through the mic. "Help." It lingered, barely audible, then cut out. My heart slammed. Reyes and I locked eyes, adrenaline flooding. I keyed the microphone. "Show us the location, dispatch." Nothing but heavy breathing. Not through the speaker, but from behind me. I twisted. Reyes was already drawing his torch across the back seat. I stayed on the driver's side, flashlight sweeping. "Hello?" I called into the darkness. My words sounded hollow. The breathing grew louder, raspy. I took a step back, realizing it wasn't in the car at all, but behind the tailgate. I sidestepped and trained the beam on the bed of the truck parked on the shoulder. Another patrol unit wrapping up a hit and run. The tailgate was down. Nothing there except dust and dead tumbleweeds. "Reyes," I hissed, signaling him around the car. He circled, eyes narrowed, then froze, pointing. I turned my light to the shoulder beside the guardrail. There, half in shadow, was a single muddy footprint. It was too large for a man, almost grotesquely wide. Before I could identify it, the breathing crackled over the radio again, this time clear. "Don't trust the road." I slammed my hand on the cruiser and fumbled for the mic. "Dispatch, where are you? Identify yourself." Static. Then the faint hiss of footsteps, slow, deliberate, trailing away. I caught a glimpse, a silhouette at the edge of the headlights, impossibly tall, shoulders hunched. It slipped into the roadside brush, and my stomach turned cold. "Shit," I muttered. "We need backup." Reyes and I climbed back into the cruiser. He hit lights and I keyed the mic. "Units 23 and 24. Request immediate assistance. Possible subject on foot." My voice cracked as we peeled away, tires spitting gravel. Radio went silent. No response, no acknowledgement. Just dead air. The highway stretched out before us, mile markers flying past, but the dread sat heavy in my chest. I glanced at Reyes. His jaw was tight, eyes fixed on the road. We passed the next marker, 90, then 91, and the breathing whispered through the static again, right there inside the cab, though the mic was switched off. "Get us to the next exit," I said, voice trembling. "I don't care if it's empty. Let's just get somewhere with a phone." Reyes swerved onto the frontage road. Empty buildings lined the road. The shuttered facade of a truck stop. Neon tubing shattered on the sign. We stopped under a lone street lamp, its glow sputtering like a dying ember. I reached for my cell, but no bars, not one. Behind us, the cruiser's taillights illuminated a figure standing in the road, half turned away, back to us. Tall, ragged coat draped over spindly shoulders. Even standing still, it seemed to sway. A breeze kicked up, rattling the dry leaves, but the figure didn't move. Reyes grabbed my shoulder. "Danny." I didn't answer. Instead, I swung the driver's door open, flashlight in hand, and stepped out. The cold night air hit me like ice. I shone the beam on the figure's back. It didn't turn. I cleared my throat. "Sir, can I help you?" No reply, just silence. My beam drifted up, and I caught a glimpse of the road's edge where the gravel met the asphalt. Another ring of candle wax, partially buried in the shoulder dust. No candle, just the ring. The hair on my neck prickled. I shone the light at the figure again. It was gone. No footprints leading toward the brush, no flash of movement. Nothing but the wind now, whispering through the telephone lines overhead. Cold settled in my bones. I rushed back to the cruiser and slammed the door. Reyes locked his side. We didn't speak. I jammed the mic, but it still refused to cooperate. Then, as if a cruel joke, the lights on the dash flickered, and the CB lit up with one word scrawled across the screen in my own handwriting. Home. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. I could almost feel my wife's bedroom miles away. The memory of her silhouette slipping into dreams while I chased ghosts on these highways. Reyes flicked on the lights and gunned the engine. We tore out of that spot, wheels burning rubber. Behind us, the wavering street lamp finally went dark, leaving us swallowed by the night. I didn't mention the word for the report. I still don't know what it meant. But I know this. Whatever it was, it followed us out of Childress County. And it's still out there, waiting for the next car to pull over. When dispatch finally came back online 20 minutes later, they asked if we were all right. I thought about telling them the truth, the breath in the radio, the silhouette, the wax rings. But instead I lied. Everything's fine, just a flat tire. Reyes didn't say a word. He just stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. We both knew we were lying, but neither of us wanted to voice it out loud. I'll tell you about the third call, my own driveway, after I grab another cup of coffee. But I'll warn you, sometimes the thing that brings you home is the thing you fear the most. I rolled into my driveway at exactly 3:12 a.m., the dashboard clock glowing like a warning. The street was empty, houses darkened, rows of silhouettes under the Texas moon. I killed the engine, sat for a moment, and let the silence wash over me. The kind that's supposed to comfort you at home, but felt as hollow as the CB static that haunted me. My wife's truck was gone. She'd taken the kids to her mother's for the weekend. Thank God she had. I reached over, clicked off the cruiser's lights, and grabbed the duffel bag from the back seat. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. The whispers from the last 2 calls crawled under my skin, and for a second I thought I heard them echo off the garage door. Home. Don't trust the road. I stepped onto the front porch, the screen door's mesh scraping a soft protest as I pushed it closed behind me. Inside, the house was dark, except for the faint glow of the security panel by the door. I punched in the code and flicked on the hall light. The beam was dim, must have tripped a breaker, and it gave off that same sputtering buzz as every other light I'd flicked recently. I leaned against the wall, heart pounding, and tried to steady my breath. I set the duffel down by the stairs and shuffled to the kitchen for coffee. The pot was empty. My wife must have finished the last of it before she left. I clicked on the kettle, and it rattled to life. While it heated, I rifled through the mail on the counter. Bill's junk flyers, a note from my son's school about spring break, but my eyes kept flicking back to the window above the sink. Outside, a lone street lamp cast a yellow pool across the lawn. Beyond that, the road stretched out into darkness. The kettle clicked off. I poured the water into the French press but paused. There was something on the counter I hadn't noticed before. A single ring of melted candle wax, the color of old bone, right next to a coaster. No candle, no soot, just the wax. I stared at it, mind racing. How did that get there? I hadn't lit a candle in this house since Christmas, and never at 2 or 3 in the morning. Whoever, or whatever, left it knew where I lived. My skin prickled, and I almost dropped the press. I grabbed the printout of my last report from the table, my neatly typed notes about the disabled car and that silhouette, and ripped it in half. I stuffed the pieces in the trash. I didn't want any record of what happened, didn't want anyone poking around. Not dispatch, not detectives, nobody. This was between me and the night. I pressed down on the plunger, the coffee gurgling. I sipped it, bitter, burning, but it was the closest I'd felt to normal in days. I set the mug down and, on impulse, opened the back door to let in some cold air. The porch light came on automatically, flooding the backyard with that yellow glow. I stepped outside and let the air wash over me, crisp as a blade. The moon was high, clouds drifting across it like drifting thoughts. I scanned the yard, the fence line, the rusted swing set, the stretch of driveway leading to the street. All was still. Too still. Then, in the faint glow of the street lamp, I saw something on the pavement. I leaned forward, heart thudding, and recognized the shape. Footprints, bare, muddy, almost identical to the ones I saw at Childress. Wide, misshapen, as if the ground itself had borne witness to something not quite human. They started at the end of my driveway and trailed off into the grass, heading toward the cul-de-sac. My breath caught. I flicked on the flashlight app on my phone and knelt for a closer look. The prints were fresh, glistening with dew, and there, in the center of each, a tiny pool of hardened wax, the same color as the ring in my kitchen. No sign of a candle or anything that could have melted it. Just wax. I straightened, scanning the shadows. That's when I heard it. Soft. A single breath on the wind, right behind me. I spun around, flashlight beam sweeping the backyard, but saw nothing. My hand slid to my belt, where my service pistol lay under the holster. I hesitated, never wanted to draw it home, but the breath came again, closer, carrying a wet rasp like lungs forced through old leather. I squared my shoulders, flicked off the phone light, and stepped forward, training the beam on the tall fence. My gaze drifted up to the second-story porch window of the house across the street. Dark, empty, and then back to the ground. Another wax ring smeared into the grass. I knelt again, knuckles brushing the cool dew. My throat closed. I felt it before I heard it. A movement, a whisper of fabric against flesh. My head snapped up. At the edge of my vision, between the fence pickets, I caught a sliver of something tall, draped in a ragged coat, kneeling down to inspect the prints. Its body was hunched, shoulders bared like broken branches, and the head was cocked, watching me. No face, just darkness under the hood. I stood, heart pounding. This was my property, my home. I fumbled for my phone to call 911, but as I raised it, the figure slipped back behind the fence and vanished into the yard of the silent house next door. No rustle of leaves, no snap of a twig. One moment there, the next, gone. I backed up, every instinct screaming to run inside, but my legs felt like lead. I swallowed hard, head clearing. I could grab the rifle from the closet, I thought. I could lock every door. But what good would it do? This wasn't about bullets. Whatever this was, it didn't bleed, it didn't scream, it just watched. I slammed the back door shut, locked it, and double-checked every deadbolt. The ring on the kitchen counter glowed in the hall light, mocking me. I flicked it off and heard the whir of the breaker resetting. The kitchen flooded with brightness. I raced back, no more half measures, and flicked on every lamp in the house until it was as bright as day. I paced for a minute, staring out each window. Still nothing. The only sound was the furnace kicking in downstairs, a low thrum that should have comforted me. Instead, it underscored the emptiness. I sank onto the couch, phone in hand, ready to call dispatch. I typed out, "Possible home intrusion, suspect disturbed prints," and then deleted it. No one would believe me. They'd chalk it up to a prowler or a stray kid with a candle. They'd ask questions. "Who's your source, sir? Exactly, what did you see?" I'd cross that line in my report and they'd send a unit. Then what? They'd find nothing, and I'd look like an idiot. I dropped the phone and slid down, head in hands. The coffee was cold now. I could smell the March air drifting through a cracked window. I thought of Reyes, of that silhouette on the road, of the kid at Childress who said someone waved him back into traffic, of the nephew who vanished into the oil field trailers. All the breadcrumbs led back here, to my home, my family. I stood and crossed to the window, watching the road. No headlights, no movement, only moon and darkness, and the echo of a word. Home. I pressed my forehead against the glass. The next thing I did felt like betrayal. I smiled. It felt good to be home. Safe. Loved. But as I lifted my head, I noticed the faintest glimmer by the curb. Another wax ring, just a smear in the concrete, half hidden by shadow. It wasn't a ring this time. It was words, written in that same brittle wax. "Welcome back." I froze. The letters were shaky but unmistakable. Someone, or something, had followed me here, marked my front step like it owned the place. I should have called out, should have let it know I was onto it. But I didn't. I stood there in the stifling light, heart pounding, as the house around me hummed with the mechanical reassurance of electricity and locks. Deep down, I knew there was no chasing this away with guns or lights. This thing wasn't bound by walls or fences or logic. It moved in the static, in the wax, in the spaces between heartbeats. I backed away from the window and turned off the lamps one by one, leaving the living room darker than before. I sat down again and waited. Outside, the night held its breath. I don't know how this ends. I don't know if I'll ever shake it loose. But I do know one thing. The road may be dangerous, but the journey home, that's where the real terror waits.